We're live. Hello and welcome to a special edition of HEX Therapy Live. I'm your host, Maddie Allin, with special guests, the Joker and Blaze. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Maddie.
Hello, Hexagons.
Now I'm super excited for the level of entertainment that we're going to provide tonight, as well as this is not therapy, but it's definitely something special, right? Because our topics today, we're going to go a little bit into the characters of who we are as people and as characters. Then we're going to talk about topics that seem really important to the HEX community in this moment, such as how to deal with change and where we stand with trust. And so with that being said, here's our intro, and then we'll get started. So to get the first thing out of the way, if you don't know what HEX is, it's a blockchain CD, and it pays 40% APY on average to those people who lock their coins for an average of 5 years, over $500 million. Ooh, that's so cool. Over $500 million has been locked already, and we all have our HEX merch, and Joker has one of 50 rare coins that have been minted symbolically to represent HEX.
Let me show you. So this
you put on the cotton gloves.
The gloves are on.
That's right. Let me just make sure it's nice and polished. This is number 2, if you guys can see that.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
that's so cool.
I got to make sure it's... Come on, focus, camera. Not focusing. Come on. Nope.
I believe you.
It says 2. 002 to be exact. It's such a great item. So Hex Toys came out with it, and as soon as I seen on Twitter he posted it, it was like 6 minutes after he posted it. I was like, I have to buy one because I'm ex-military and we're all about coins. First sergeant gives you a coin or something like that. You're very much loving it. So I bought it and I thought I had the first one. And then I was like, which one did I get? He goes, number 2. And I'm like, no, what do you mean number 2? I did it in 6 minutes. He goes, no, number 1 goes to someone else. And I'm like, damn it. But number 2 is fine. Yeah, number 2 is fine.
I can only imagine that Joker face in that moment when you realized it was number 2, like the makeup just being strewn across your face and just the rage and the fist. It
was kind of like one of those like moments where you hear the shot across the world, but it's fine. I'm still happy I got one.
That's cool. So I'm guessing you didn't pay like $1 million for a digital version of the coin, like on a NFT marketplace at all recently? No, okay, just checking.
I can't wait for Hex to boot, man. The 6th to the 15th, right? Or is it the 14th that wallet kind of unstakes?
I think I saw the 15th, but I've heard maybe does it have anything to do with the time zone you're in, or does it like always show the same regardless? Which that's the only thing that
Hex rolls over at UTC 0, which like does not move with the time changes. So like it used to be an hour earlier. No, it used to be an hour later. And now, because it's like whenever Hexologist goes live, it's like minus 20 minutes before the rollover for that day.
Okay.
So that's going to be an interesting day, right? And I was actually talking to RG3 and a couple of the cutthroats on yesterday on the little podcast that happened with a Discord syndicate, and it was great. It was great. And I was like, you know what? What if, say that wallet, if it was my wallet, this is what I would do. What if they just sell a hex at a time, just to kind of like.
Oh, I heard that. Yeah, that's funny.
Can you imagine? Like everyone's like sitting there in anticipation, like what is it gonna do? And it's just like. Would be crazy.
There'd just be these like single beads of sweat just like falling down all of our faces, just like.
What is it gonna do, right? What is the wallet doing? Well, the good thing is about that wallet is that it has really good like custodianship, right? So it has like many 15-year stakes and all that kind of stuff. So it seems that that wallet will have good behavior because it will be in that wallet's best interest to, either stake again, maybe, keep the interest and stake what they initially staked, or stake it all, right?
define good behavior though, because my interpretation is that they would love to just create FUD so that they can accumulate more coins at a cheaper price. And that's why like the origin address is like stalking them, having stakes on either side of them just to let them know who's boss. And, you can see I did a couple of episodes that were playing off of what other people in the HEX community have found, such as Silver the Antidote, that he corrected me and said it's suspected to be related to Three Arrows Capital, which is the first hedge fund that we think is in HEX. And so I think it's going to be interesting. I actually, because I want to reward everybody who's watching, I always try to come up with new takes on everything and, drop some hypotheses out there. And now, didn't we have like a crash in the Bitcoin price and it like wicked all the way down to like super low, like it bounced off 3,800 or something, like right when the pandemic started? Wasn't that around March 15th when that happened?
Yeah, around that.
So my new theory is that that they're accidentally signaling, like showing their hand, where there could be a sell-off in the broader market at that point because they're going to be paying lower taxes because they've held for a year.
I mean,
and yeah. This is not trading advice. Like, I don't know what to do with my like tiny little bag of Ethereum. And like, it seems like I keep going back and forth. Like at first it seemed like Richard was saying it's the top, and like, I was just listening to him, and then I make lots of money. And so like, I switched into USD allegedly. And then like, then I was like, he tweeted and he was like, well, ETH, it's EIP 1559. That's bullish for ETH right now. So I was like, oh no, buy. But it's all just like this little tiny bag that I've got just to keep my hands busy while I'm not hitting that emergency end button.
Well, go for it.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's definitely an interesting hypothesis to discuss because, like, okay, obviously the broader macro environment would lead you to believe, like, yeah, everything's bullish. There's more stimulus coming. Like, interest rates are not going anywhere. They're going to stay low. There's going to be tons of cheap debt. So obviously that's just going to inflate asset prices, crypto involved. Yes. But the only thing that worries me is the fact that some of these bigger institutions are now getting really interested again, and they're talking about crypto again. And like often that can be kind of a counter signal. That either they're trying to get themselves in, and if you're kind of got big enough money, you can pull the train back, so to speak. So it could lead to one of these kind of flash dumps that you're talking about. Or they're about to dump some of the funds from the profits that they've already made. So that's the only thing where I'd go, that's a possibility. Like overall, I think it's still bullish. I don't think we've reached the top yet, although it's probably not too far away. But I see where you're coming from with this idea that March 15th, something interesting could occur on that day.
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole stimulus check thing, that definitely has very big potential to pump. Elon Musk talking about Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all that. They definitely have, a big influence in a lot of new traders. Okay,
Yeah.
the whole Wall Street bets thing that occurred really put a huge, like, flag onto, whether it be a red flag or not, but a huge flag on what's going on in crypto, right? And there's a lot of like this new trader mentality. So if you're going to put money and stimulus check money in the hands of potential new traders, then guess what, right? Like, you're probably going to see something very interesting happen.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing is about the 15th, and we've been leading up to this for quite some time, right? Richard at one point put up, and Richard Hart, he's a prophet in the freaking game, man. He is so smart. If you're not listening to Richard, you're doing it wrong.
Oh yeah.
But he put this thing out. It was a YouTube video that it was like there was these two like avatars, of virtual avatars, and one was saying, "Buy the dips, you effing idiot," right? And the other one's like, well, "Yeah, but the market this," and then like the other one's just like, "Okay, but buy the dips, you effing idiot. You want to make money? Buy the dips." So yeah. I guess the moral of the story for that is, say on the 15th, we'll speak in terms of behavior, right? Positive behavior really is based upon the perspective of the individual who sees it as positive or negative.
That's right.
So if, say, you have a whole bunch of fiat currency ready to go on the 15th, and the guy decides to dump the coin, right? And he's just like, you know what? I'm just going to sell all my HEX. And the price goes way down at that point because liquidity goes up. Well, then that's positive behavior to the person who has fiat currency, because they're like, oh, this is HEX when it first launched. Now I'm going to buy all that liquidity.
Gift. I swear, I will be draining every bank account I have. I will be selling, if that happens, like, it'll be a gift, like such a gift.
Of course, because if they do that, you're now giving us the opportunity to get all of that HEX at a very low price. I mean, think about it. If it's a fraction, like, I mean, yes, it's what is like it's almost a penny again, or where are we at now at the price? We're at 0.008, right? 87. Yeah. So if we're, say it goes down to, I don't know, 0.000012 or something like that, and I dump $300 into it, and then it goes back up to a penny, I'm looking at quite the bag. So if it sells, I got fiat currency ready for that. You know, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I think especially with the fees too, people have been like accumulating a little bit more ETH than normal. I know it's hard for me to hold on to ETH because either I want to like launch a smart contract for like HEX badges to promote mental health, or, I want to just do something with it, right? Like I want to convert it into HEX. Like there's so many things I could do with ETH other than just hold on to it. And so, but that's obviously what we're paying our fees in. I can report some good news though, that last night I was able to buy HEX with MetaMask to do a swap. I think it was $10, and then I staked for like 15. So like those are much more reasonable fees than we were having a week or a month ago. So
I do have a question pertaining to that. So as far as the fees go, I am aware that there is another network that on not Uniswap, but it's something swap. I forget the name of it. Quick swap, right? Is that a direct impact from that lower ETH price from Uniswap, a direct impact from us being able to now go to that other network?
It's hard to tell because there's so much spoofing and like, wash trading and centralized exchanges trying to mess with the decentralized exchanges. There's so much noise in the system. I think it's safe to assume that yes, layer 2 solutions, if you want to call them that, it's not a solution for HEX, but it's a solution for some other coins that you're not wanting to deal with on layer 1. But HEX like is native to layer 1. Like if you're holding HEX not on layer 1, then you're doing it wrong. And I had a stream earlier with Bitfinesse, and everybody like laid their claim, so like I called layer 7. So like layer 7 is mine. right? And like some people called layer 8, some people called layer 69. So like,
Of course,
these
right?
layers, they're they're getting taken up, and that's fine. You have to do, you have to do 6 or 7 transactions just to get to layer 7, and you don't even know what's there. On QuickSwap, nobody's been able to explain to me why you would want to do anything with HEX there, because it cost me $10 to get there, and then it cost me $40 to get out.
Oof.
And all I could do when I was there is like swap, like to just buy HEX, like, which we established I did like the other
With
last
$10.
night for like $10 on layer 1. So like,
Well, I think it's more or less on the if you want to move it like constantly, right? So if you're like constantly moving it from like different wallets, say you're gonna make 10 or 15 different transactions, then I can see it being something to make sense, right?
but would you want to do that in HEX?
Well, no, of course not. But I'm just, again, I'm just saying like maybe that's the reason why. I'm the type of guy that, I'm gonna have a small bag of HEX that's liquid off to the side, so I can at least, I don't know, pay off my house or something like that. Or
Awesome.
and that's really the only purpose for it. And the other stuff is all staked, right? And that's what I wanted. I want it to stay staked. I want to have all those gains from the stakes, because guess what? Even though we're 10% people staked, we're getting like 40% APY. I mean, that's not a bad idea. So
that's crazy. It's crazy when you look at that on a compound interest calculator. Like, I would just encourage people to do that if you haven't yet, because that is, I understand obviously it's a dynamic system and the percentage is going to come down as more people stake, but that's insane. Like 40, the fact that we can lock in 40% right now and, still be generating, what's likely still going to be a very good interest rate 15 years from now. Game over. It's ridiculous.
That is so true. That is so true. I don't even understand why people wouldn't do it at this point. If you're not staked and you're, you want to make money, I mean, the skillet's hot, right? I mean, get it while you can. If not, then poor you. I don't know how else to say it. Not financial advice, but I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? And that's fact. We can argue numbers speak for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing more definitive.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I just really, really love about it, is that it is so supremely rational. Like, it is such an exquisitely rational thing to do when you sit down and you look at the numbers, you look at the way the interest is going to function over a long period of time, you look at the way in which that essentially creates like a price floor for you. So you basically have no risk with an infinite upside. Like, there is no better trade you can take in your life. Like, anyone who knows anything about even just leverage trading and stuff, you're obviously always trying to minimize the downside and maximize the upside. And, in a leverage trade, like a 1-to-4 ratio is considered good, right? And I'm not saying that anyone should start trading. We're not trading here. But if you look at this in terms of those kind of constraints, infinite upside and basically no risk to the downside, like it literally doesn't get better.
Right. Like,
you're even removing the risk like of yourself when you stake.
Yeah.
Like, you are a risk to yourself when the Bitcoin price goes up 1 million X and you're like, all right, like, time to sell, but you sold too early and you sold to Wall Street, and now Bitcoin is centralized. So it's basically the same as Fedcoin. So, good job ruining Bitcoin, but it's not going to be easy to do that with HEX.
Yeah, you can't nuke your bags like that with HEX. I mean, you can nuke your bags, but like, there's a big, like, let's speak some psychology. There's a big red button that's pretty much telling you no. Don't emergency on stake, right?
Yes. This is dangerous. Do not do this. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if you guys ever use StreamYard, but there's a button in StreamYard that I'm using now to stream, and the button looks a lot like the emergency end stake button, at go.hex.com/stake. And so like sometimes I just do like a 7-hour stream with Wills only and Kareem because I'm just scared to like hit that button to end my live stream.
It's kind of like the nuke button, like bang,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I can't
the
do
sirens start going off.
I love those streams, man. I've watched far too many of those like 7-hour plus streams. They're epic. They're so good.
You know what I really would like someone to do, and I might do it myself, to be honest with you. I want to do dreamer streams, like streams to kind of like, you know what? Let's just take a moment and like say what say Hex moons and you get everything you wanted out of Hex. What are you gonna do? You know, like
I love that. I love that.
Just to interview like some Hexicans and say, you know, maybe fire off 100 questions or something.
That would be really good content.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the group on Telegram, t.me/hexdreams?
Yes, I'm in that group.
Awesome.
Like I would like to interview some of those guys.
Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about the Telegram group.
So the Telegram group literally posts like things that people want to buy with their Hex gains. So you'll see like houses, you'll see Lamborghinis. I mean, you'll see a lot of things in there that kind of opens your eyes to like, man, like we're really doing this. You know what I mean? We're really doing this. And I mean, I'm talking about like homes and like some people have like mansions and planes and like it's so great of a place to be because you kind of get that feeling of what we're at, right? Like you feel like this is what we're working for, right?
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Hexo made a video. It was like showing, it was a compilation of people who have like paid off their parents' debt or their parents' house. And then like they're telling their parents and they get it on camera. And he said that that's one thing he wants to do with his Hex gains.
Aww, that's so
and it made
nice.
people cry in real life.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very noble thing to do, you know.
Yeah.
I think you know, anybody who pays off their parents' debt, I absolutely applaud you. I wish my son would be like that. Come and be like, hey, Dad, by the way, I was invested in this cryptocurrency called Hex, and guess what? It kind of mooned. So here you go. No more mortgage payment. I'm like, really? I'm like, you don't have to. I probably would have denied it, to be honest with you. I'm just that kind of person. And I think anybody here would have denied it, right? Like if your kid ever went up to you and said, hey, mom or dad, like I'll pay off your bills, would you be okay with that, or would you?
It would depend on how rich. Like, I mean, if they had like billions of dollars, maybe. But like, you know, if they've made a couple of $1 million or something from a cryptocurrency, I'd be like, no, just go build your future, get out of here. Like, you know, I'll take care of myself and I'll just like shuffle off into the night.
What about you, Maddie?
I was just seeing we have D-Live's mom in the chat. I didn't know.
That's my mother. That's my mom. Hi, Mom.
I think she wants me to ask you the question.
Oh, boy. Hold on. Mom, come closer. You know I'll pay off your bills, right? You know that. You're going to be driving something nice. I'm going to buy you a house. Okay? I'm going to make sure you're well taken care of. But don't give none to my sister. That's the only speculation. I'm just kidding. You could give her some. But, yeah. We have a bit of a sibling rivalry, but I still love her.
I'm picking up on that. Yeah.
Well,
we'll talk later.
Without my mom in the chat.
I was a little bit surprised in Richard's most recent stream when he said that his family hasn't asked for anything, even though he's offered.
I remember
he's
him
worth
saying
billions.
That.
Like, I'm sure of it. And so,
he went to them and he was like, "Hey, you can have anything you want. What do you want?" And then they were like, "Nah, I'm good." And he's like, and he even said it on the stream. He's like, if somebody came to me, he goes, and told me, get anything you want, he goes, I like free shit. Remember? Because I like that. I would love to have that. But some people, I kind of get a feeling that most people would say no to that freebie.
I'm like thinking it through. I feel like my dad would say no. He would say no. I don't know about my mum. My mum might say yes though. If I came to her and I was like, look, I'll buy whatever you want. She might be like, oh really?
What would she want?
I mean, she's actually pretty simple, pretty low maintenance. She'd probably just want maybe just like a bigger house or a newer car or something like that. It'd be pretty simple. Yeah, but dad would just say no. He would just be like, nah, it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, it technically, it's like your offspring is doing good, right? So you're like, keep going. Like, that's all you ever want to do is see your child like do better, right? You don't want to see like, anything, you don't want to see them like spending money on, I wouldn't want my kid to spend money on me. I would just be like, you know what? Just do your thing. Go, young guy. Yeah. My dad used to tell me that all the time. Go, young guy.
Yeah. That's all.
So.
I mean, I think it's part of like just like our like evolutionary like history, right? Like, I mean, that's your genetic material in there. So it's like it's basically in some way it's just an extension of you, So yeah. And I think that connection really just kind of makes it like, well, if you're doing well, I'm doing well. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of parents have this like that offspring of mine is a direct representation of not only myself, but the upbringing of what I've done. Yeah. And not only that, but I was going to give this to you anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My mother even said it. She goes, when I pass on or whatever, and mom, I'm throwing you under the bus. When I pass on, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give your sister that. And I'm like, you know what? Just don't even put it in my name. Put it in my son's name. Give it to him. That's where it's going anyway, for college fund or whatever. And she goes, yeah, but it's for you. Like, he's your son, you're mine. And I'm like, it's going to him anyway.
I think money is going to be super programmable by that point. So she'll be able to like put all these like weird specifications on the money. Like, you're allowed to use it for Arby's, but not for McDonald's.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it became that granular?
They're still kind of controlling you from the grave. You can have the money, but only if you follow my rules. If you're going to be living under my house.
Right. I paid for that house, so all this money, down to the cent, is going towards McDonald's. I don't like Arby's. They don't have the meat.
Yeah. One of the things that I hope to build, or that I hope to see built into money, is mental health. Right. And so programmable money creates actually properties that don't exist with paper money. So, for example, when we look at, contingency management, this is the area of psychology that has the strongest effect size out of anything. And so contingency management is where when you pay people to change their behavior, such as quitting using drugs. In my case, I worked in a nicotine and tobacco laboratory, a neuroscience laboratory, for a number of years. We paid people $1,000 to quit smoking.
Did they?
Tobacco, cigarettes, and then measured their brain waves and their behavior and their mood. And so I really think that that it's interesting that a large percentage of people who are addicted to tobacco, cigarettes, they pay thousands of dollars a year to buy the cigarettes, and they want to quit, but they can't until somebody comes along and pays them $1,000 of somebody else's money, right? And the cool thing about programmable money, I think, is that you could pay yourself, which is, I mean, I need more feedback on how this comes across, because I really think that, so I made a prototype, and I learned how to program, and I'm not a very good programmer, so it's probably not good or whatever. But I was just trying to do a proof of concept. I realized that you could log into like Fitbit, you could type up some words, some code into their API or SDK or like software development kit. And then I tried to do this with Bitcoin. So I like spent a summer learning how to like program a Bitcoin node and everything. And I basically showed myself that, all right, I could pay myself in Bitcoin. Like I could lock the Bitcoin and then it only gets unlocked. I get paid for every step I take, let's say. And that could be a treatment for depression because we know that behavioral activation is one of the techniques that works for some people. And so people, could, I think with programmable money, they could program all sorts of behaviors that they would want to see in themselves without a third party. And that, a lot of people, they already program themselves with money by like accepting a job and doing work for others. But then they fall short on like working on themselves and like keeping to their own fitness and well-being. Like, and so I think it'd be really powerful, sure, there's probably a dark side to it too. But
yeah,
thoughts?
I think it's a really interesting concept for sure. Like, I guess kind of hacking into that, like incentive mechanism that we have, inherently as humans, and looking, like you're saying, like looking to see if we can flip the script and actually make those decisions on how we incentivize ourselves. Like, I could definitely see there being an effect there, and it being, useful for someone who's willing to sit down and again kind of rationally think about what are my goals, what sorts of behaviors do I need to habituate in order to reach these goals, and can I set up an incentive structure with myself in order to reach those goals. And I think it's totally possible. I'd be interested to know, I guess, on the flip side, whether anything would be lost by that incentive not coming from the outside. Like, so I just wonder if there's anything.
So that's the cool thing is like, so let's take the example of HEX, which I believe is like the first iteration of this idea, and why I'm so attracted to HEX is, like the tech, like, so it's cliche. It's cliche to say, and like these mad gains, they're great, but like having mad gains in like people's behavior change across the entire globe, like programming mental health into money would be like create mad gains for everybody, right? And so I think like HEX is the first iteration where you're able to program yourself to save because there's a time lock that you can't get out of once you get into it, right? And so in that same way, so I think like the behavior change, it would be set up a little bit different because basically you could just make it like you could get out of it. It wouldn't have to be as immutable as HEX in the base layer, and as immutable as like sending yourself money into the future. If you're trying to change your behavior, let's say you create like, so basically the incentive structure could be every time I buy cigarettes with my credit card at this location, it like adds $1 into my savings account that's set aside only for incentives to quit. And then like, whenever I set up this smart contract with myself, then like it generates a key that goes to my doctor, it gets emailed to them, and then they just have to email it back to me so I can unlock my money. Now like my doctor is going to, be testing my blood to see if I'm nicotine free or whatever. And then they can verify, back to me that I can unlock my money. Now, what if that $1 per pack every day, you put $300 into HEX, and just like BitBoy got like $60,000 out of HEX, right? Just from 300 being gifted to him. Like you could argue, well, maybe I would like, do a side deal with my doctor. I'd be like, hey, I'll give you $30,000 if I don't have to quit smoking. Like you take 30 and I'll take 30. Just like send me that little key back. Like, as long as you're making it like, but then it's just like you didn't like, that's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be like inconvenient to like go out of your way. And like, you know, then you're just like sitting there with an extra $30,000. You're still smoking like you always would have been. Like, you could set it up again. It's fine.
So, I like the idea, but that's also based upon if the individual's reinforcer would be monetary, right? Because some people, they don't like.
You're so smart.
Thank you. Like, say you have a millionaire that's doing this, right? I mean, or maybe somebody who's like, I'm a type of guy, or they're the type of person that are like, I'm okay.
I tried to get Richard to do it on the live stream,
but I mean, he'd be like,
he doesn't need, like, he's cool,
right? He's like, I don't, it doesn't matter for him, right? So maybe in terms of like, for like Bitcoin and that kind of thing, or maybe it could be along the lines of, say, food's a more like a reinforcer. Make a deal with a specific restaurant owner or something, where they'll buy you a meal that you really like, and send it to your house when the time comes, or things like that. Aside from just like a payout,
Yeah. I mean, I think the possibilities are endless, and there's definitely something there. I mean, just going back to the basics, or not that HEX is basic, but just kind of going back to what we all know. Like, I definitely have noticed a really significant and fast change in my own, investing and financial behaviors since being involved in HEX. There's no question about it. Like, I only really heard about HEX like just before the big payday, and then I didn't even really know what it was until maybe late December. I didn't really understand like the share system and all that sort of stuff, and I've only just started doing 5x5 stake and 4x5 stakes. But in that short period of time now, rather than when I was invested in, say, like just Bitcoin or Ethereum or something like that, where I'd be sort of trading in and out of it, timing dips and looking for tops, and I had there weren't any diamond hands involved in my holdings there, right? But then just coming into the HEX ecosystem and starting to interact with it has really, really changed my behavior and my thought process around, long-term versus short-term, and the time value of money, and making commitments to myself and honoring my promises and all that sort of stuff. And it's really kind of like embodied and ingrained in me. So definitely we know that, programmable money, at least with financial behavior, can make huge differences to people. And it just, I guess, a question of to what extent can we generalize that to other areas of life and mental health, like you're talking about.
So I think that like that this is a property of hard money in the first place, is to improve people's mental health. And that's, I would call it more of like maybe a subconscious, or maybe I don't have the right word for it, but it's like your monetary environment is healthier. And so that causes you to have healthier behavior without even like realizing it, in a sense. Or maybe like if you're super woke like Blaze, or you have like a psychology background, you have training, then you're gonna notice things that maybe other people, they're just like, oh, what a coincidence, I'm in Bitcoin now, and like I'm taking better care of myself, right? Yeah. But I think like, so there's the that's kind of like the macroeconomic perspective, and there's a lot of evidence for this in history. When you look at Safedine Amos, I took like 3 of his classes, but I can't pronounce his last name. I learned a bunch of other cool stuff though, like before World War I, there was actually a golden age, and a lot of the things that we use now, what he refers to as 0 to 1 inventions, were created just before all the countries were like forced to start basically like, going to a fiat system instead of a gold standard. Is actually because they had to, it was the first time they needed to fund a war, basically that was happening so far away from them. And normally people don't pay their real money if they're not being attacked in their home country. Like, I'm not paying for you to go like conquer the world. Like, I'm just trying to work here. You know, like, you can pay for that yourself, telling the government. And like, but then it came to a point where, oh, like, governments figured out, oh, cool, like, you know, we could just print more money and pay for the war that way. So that, like, going off the gold standard then, like, allowed for world war to happen, right? And but there were so many things that were invented before that, like the computer, like, traces back to then, like, before, like, you know, the late 1890s, there's like this huge burst of like human creativity. And so, like, since then, with all the advances in technology and manufacturing and everything, you know, safety makes like a really good argument when you look at like, oh, they invented antibiotics, steel, like, you know, on and on, all these things that actually, you know, that makes a big difference that we can't even realize because we don't know the progress humanity would have made with a hard money system backing us up the whole time. And so, like, it seems like we're still progressing, but we could actually be much further if the markets were able to, you know, have like, what is it called? Like capital destruction. Like, you know, if you didn't bail everybody out, then like bad businesses that are inefficient, they would go out of business, and then more innovation would come in. There won't be like as many monopolies and on, like.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, I think we can even see it like through the pandemic. Basically, like all of the government policies have just broken, you know, an already broken financial system even further. Like everything that they have done has only served to reinforce like that divide between the rich and the poor. You know, we can see it happening, you know, with asset prices inflating and the things that rich people get wealthy from are only going up in value because of the, you know, the cheap debt and because of the stimulus money. And none of it, you know, even the stimulus money, none of it has benefited anybody who has, you know, had fewer resources to begin with. So you can just see whenever they intervene, they just break it further. It just gets worse. So
yeah,
that's why I love crypto. Because there is this kind of last bastion of there's still some freedom here, you know, and whether or not it gets subverted or whatever by wealthier individuals, you know, time will tell. But right now there is this like real innovation happening. People are really dealing with market, you know, market mechanisms that can legitimately fix things. So yeah, I'm really pumped to be here.
It's really exciting that, you know, I think HEX is already creating an opportunity for the world to switch to a system that is more mentally healthy in terms of, right, like knowing what the future monetary policy is going to be. Like, people always say how great that is in Bitcoin, you know, that's going to change the world. All the while, Bitcoin is becoming more and more centralized, being held by institutions and billionaires, you know, and like it's actually enforced by social consensus.
You know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that like
Hexism.
You're saying that because like everything, I mean, not everything, but let me not say everything, but there's a lot of companies out there and there's a lot of like specific ideas and products and whatnot that are out there that are meant to do one specific thing, and then after a specific amount of time goes by, it turns into the thing that it's vowed not to be or do.
Yes.
And let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
YouTube used to be all about the individual creator, and then it turned into a specific, like a Netflix, right? Yeah. Same thing goes with DLive. DLive used to be this free speech, not decentralized platform that had no moderation. Now it's literally worse than YouTube in moderation. Like you can literally get banned off of DLive for Twitter posts. Like everything, it always turns into the thing it vows not to be. And then the solution comes out, like HEX to Bitcoin. And now that is seen as the savior of this like tyrannic market. Right. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. Why is that continuously occurring?
I love this question.
I think it's a great question. And I am not a religious person by any means, but I do think there is some truth to the idea of there being some sort of constant human nature which keeps rearing its ugly head in various different sets of circumstances. So I think for whatever reason, for humans, it's very easy to become, greedy. It's very easy to, choose the short term over the long term, to choose the easy over the hard. And I think we tend to keep falling into this over and over and over again. And we see evidence of it all around us in exactly those examples that you just talked about, Joker, where, we think we're going to be able to fix things with this new invention, but it kind of distracts us from looking inward and looking at, well, what are we doing as humans that keeps perpetuating this cycle? And can we actually begin to have an impact on shifting that in a direction where we won't keep making this same mistake? So yeah, I think there's a little bit of distraction going on.
I think a big one is groupthink. Groupthink essentially goes back to an individual who, if you guys, I'm sure you guys are aware, it goes to a centralized individual who's in charge, the hierarchy, right? And that person essentially gets this power. They get this drunkenness of this power. And then they start doing what innately is, like you said, human, right?
Yeah.
They look out for being the biggest and the best and the better. But then they portray that, and their little minions would eventually turn whatever the project into, again, this centralized tyrannical system. And then of course, then there's the opposing authority, and then the people who didn't believe in it, right? And they left the group and they build their own and they combat it, and it just keeps happening either way. It's crazy. Like,
it seems to be a really unfortunate. It's a little bit of a black pill, but it's kind of this unfortunate thing where pretty much every institution we build eventually becomes corrupted, and it eventually and we have we can kind of create bulwarks against that as much as possible, but there is always this push towards the corrupting of the original idea of freedom, and I think it is about freedom. I think there is a very, for whatever reason, things are set up where creating a situation where everybody has a good level of freedom is actually very, very difficult to achieve, and so it's constantly under threat. It's constantly under pressure from forces that would like to kind of take that and use it for their own self-interest. So it is this constant kind of fight between, I'd almost say, freedom and slavery, that is kind of constantly going on in the human story.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm wondering how do we quantify that?
Yeah, I mean, man, I don't know. I'd love to know.
That sounds like a Nobel Peace thing.
53% of the world lives in non-dictatorships, so in free zones basically, and that number has been decreasing and increasing, going back and forth. Now that the free people are having less kids, and the non-free people, who live in basically surveillance state. Well, everything's a surveillance state, but in communist driven countries with more central planning. I mean, it's there's more, the population is growing faster. So
look what happened. So remember what we were in the background, not streaming, and we were talking about freedom, right? And America and whatnot. Well, America was created to get away from, the monarch type of system with kings and queens of England, right? And they came here and they fought and they created the Constitution and the, and the amendments and that's which pretty much made America, right? But let's fast forward 200 years after that, and like you said, surveillance state, and now, well, can we trust our people? We have the Patriot Act. You have freedom to a point, and now we have this internet with the cancel culture, as we've seen.
Man, it's crazy.
So I literally, and listen to this. Freedom of speech is very much valued in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay? However, now they have this separate thing. Well, if you're a company, you can dictate what A, B, C, and D is, right? You don't have to have freedom of speech. Well, some guy was talking crap to me on Twitter, and he said something very disrespectful about my deceased father. And what I said was, I would punch you in the face for that. Can you believe that I got banned for 6 days for that?
Oh my goodness.
No.
For 6 days for saying I would have punched you in the mouth for that. I mean, again, we're regressing into what we didn't want to be.
But it is. It's almost infantile to an extent. It's this kind of need to, like, everybody's got to be covered up in cotton wool, because if someone looks at you the wrong way, like, you're going to be, you're just going to die or something. Like, you can't. Like we've lost and really any sense of, like, freedom of expression. And I was like, that's something I've always loved about America's, your Constitution, and the fact that, people there understand freedom and freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff. But then when I see the reality of what's actually happening, I'm like, man, that really sucks. Because, like, that was like, it felt like the last place to go. And, like, I'm sure it's still there, and it's still there in the hearts of the people and all that sort of stuff. But it really seems to be being kind of dampened out. That spirit being kind of dampened at the moment by these kind of totalitarian tech giants and friends. And
I'm super excited because I think freedom is actually it's not the normal, and I think it's an experiment. And I think like the people in the HEX community and in the crypto community, like, we are at the center of this freedom experiment, because and just like the people who came before us that started the internet, and they were like, maybe this will help, like central broadcasting system. What? Like, this is internet 2.0. It's people to people. And, like, again, it's an experiment. And just like people in Bitcoin say, but then, like, Bitcoin falls short, is this idea that, like, that the more you try to destroy something, you actually make it, like, more resilient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we see this, like, in bacteria even, right? Like, what is it? Medication resistant, like, bacteria and stuff, right?
Oh,
because,
yeah.
because you're like, you're just, like,
Superbug.
creating, like, a stronger version by, like, trying to kill it off. And so, like, I think it's really interesting to see, like, so, all right, the internet, it didn't work exactly how we thought it was going to work out for freedom, because power got centralized, right? And then Bitcoin got invented. And, like, again, seems like it could be something here.
It's funny
now it's
about
getting
that.
centralized, right? And so the fact that HEX has all these secret things built into it that we're just discovering now, like low liquidity. Oh, Elon, you want to buy in with $1 billion? Sorry, you're only going to get 60 million HEX no matter how much you pay for it. And, like, locking your coins. I really think that HEX is, like, the closest thing we have right now to exiting the system, because it doesn't have any middlemen, and it actually, it's more immutable than Bitcoin is, because it's a code that was locked into an Ethereum block in 2019. And Bitcoin, just like Richard has said, like, I ran a Bitcoin node. Like, you double click on a file and you decide which file you want to run, and that's Bitcoin. Like, and there's people one of the lead devs, he's like a contributor on GitHub. It's like the Bitcoin core protocol. Like he quit the other day. He said like, "Oh, this is worth way too much. Like I wasn't planning on all this. Like, you know, I don't want to be responsible for this." Because he was doing like 30% of like the dev work in Bitcoin, and he just quit. He's like, "No, I'm out. Peace." And so he's like handing all this over to other people to manage, to like decentralize the project. And so again, like it's all happening now. Like, and whether we realize it or not, we're at the center of something that's brand new. It's never existed before in the history of humanity. And like, it is locked. And I'm really predicting that we're going to see history get made here when it comes to this layer 2 stuff. And I know like one of the topics on our agenda tonight might even, you know, be this idea of like, how is the HEX community going to adapt to change, and how are we going to maintain like trust and not get split up, right? Like Bitcoin got split up into Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV. Like that was over some really petty like technical details that didn't even happen, right? And so it seems like, you know, the centralized powers to be, the miners, you know, doing their security racket. I mean, that's like what the dollar is too. Like, you know, it's like a security racket basically.
Guns, yeah.
And, you know, so I think it's really interesting that HEX, it's going to be operating in a different way. And already we're seeing this layer 2 stuff. Like, this is an opportunity for us to see exactly how HEX is going to hold up when there's disagreement, when there's change in the community. And I haven't said this yet, but I'm just going to say it now. I wouldn't be surprised if Richard is testing us.
Possibly, he wouldn't be surprised. He's not he's not a dumb guy. I'm sure he's doing things in the background, kind of.
But if you think about it, like this should be a community decision, and it should not be him who comes in and says that this is really bad for HEX, and it's okay because like HEX will survive this better than ever. And like, and so I really think like this layer 2 stuff, you know, and we can talk about what the, you know, briefly, like kind of what my thought is, but you know, if you're changing the money to make it not have so many, like if you're breaking the truth engine out of HEX, you're saying like, well, you actually don't have to time lock, then that's not really HEX anymore. So I'm not sure what your guys' thoughts are.
I'm still going back and forth a little bit. I've been thinking about it quite a lot over the last couple of days. And I think my thinking at the moment is that people are going to attempt these things. And given that we are operating in a much more free system, there's not really a way to stop this stuff from happening. Doesn't mean we have to support it or promote it or anything like that, but people are going to try. And we have, you know, a group of people who are in a brand new space, which means we're all fairly innovative. We're all, you know, fairly entrepreneurial. We're all looking for opportunities, right? And so people are going to keep attempting this stuff. But I think ultimately the answer is that HEX will win, because like HEX as is has like the game theory of game theories. So people
I like that.
Yeah. You know, people might attempt this stuff, and all that's really going to happen is that people might try to trade these stakes, but I think they'll get wrecked because they're never going to get as good a price as they would have had they just bought the HEX. And, that, my friends, is a Freudian slip. And staked it long, and staked it early, and the people who do that are still going to come out on top. That's kind of where I sit with it, is you can't stop it. It's going to happen, but we win anyway. So
I think HEX will prevail in the end. There will be that, you know, group mentality where One says they want this, the other says they want that.
Yep.
You made a very interesting statement about biological warfare between antibodies and vaccines and some superbug. Well, the same goes in humanity, right? So the more that you essentially attempt to suppress something, there's always going to be an opposing force that doesn't like what you're suppressing or doing. So what they're going to do is they're going to start growing into their own little narrative, and the more that you're trying to suppress them, the more that they're going to grow to overcome what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And that's it serves the same with humanity, where a human being will be like, all right, well, I'm on this team. I created this. You're attacking my narrative. I know I'm doing it better. So I'm going to start influencing those around me, essentially becoming the cancer cell in this aspect, or this virus cell that's making more of itself. And they're going to do things to overcome the vulnerabilities of what's happening, right? So like the Bitcoin SV, SV, whatever it's called, again, those are two different groups that had different ideas, and obviously it became what it became. HEX, however, always has been a perfect product, right? It never had any vulnerabilities, no admin keys, 100% uptime. I mean, the list goes on, right? I mean, Richard really did his homework. So to be silly and develop something else that essentially would branch off from it, sure, the people at the top probably would make a buck or two because they're selling it to their supposed community or whatnot after they built it, but in the long run, is it going to do much good? Most likely not.
I think we can stop it.
How so, Maddie?
I think that we can use this as a reason to buy cheap HEX and lock it. I think that all of us have a little bit of HEX that's liquid, and the only way to stop layer 2 BS is to not sell any to anybody who could put it on layer 2. So we all need to delay gratification and stop selling and lock your HEX long and stop yourself from even being able to play these games that could ruin the system. Not ruin the system, like they could ruin, like wreck your relationship to this money, right? Because again, I see this as, like we're tired of changing as people, like we don't want to change to like meet our promises to ourselves. So like, let's change the money, like that's the old way of thinking. That's the old system, right? Like in our new system, like you can voluntarily sign up to be held accountable to yourself and to tell the truth, to transfer your economic value through the fourth dimension of time to your future self. And like, I paid $25 to do that last night.
Yep.
Not bad. And like Hex Able Archer, you just donated $19.99 to the channel, so you pretty much just paid for my like future self to deal with those gas fees. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a lot of like really valid points. At the end of the day, like the narrative for us doesn't change. Like it's still HEX. It's still you buy it, you stake it long, and that's when you're ultimately going to do best from this system. And if you're willing to do that, you'll reap the rewards. Like it's still a very simple equation. But I think if we get too if we become too intense about shutting it down, then I think to Joker's point, like that will often create that equal and opposite reaction, right? Where people are going to polarize further. People are going to, get into this space where there's more conflict, and the people who are trying to build this layer 2, they start looking at us like the Bitcoin maxis or whatever, and we're just too close-minded and we just can't see and this and that, and we're stifling innovation and all this stuff happens. I think when you've got diamonds, let them try to create the what. I don't even know any other jewels that are less valuable. Let them try to create their fake knockoffs. Like it's fine. like I said, I think overall the hex game theory will stand the test.
Well, like I see really not a crisis, but an opportunity to like educate people, and to take the time to like help people understand hex in a deeper way, because what I've already seen in the space is that like the different people who put on hex streams, like they come out in favor of this at first, and then like they learn more about it, and then they come out against it, right? And so like I think that it could be a really cool opportunity really to shut this down, because I can already tell you I've been thinking about tradable hex stakes ever since I launched tradable hex stakes before the big payday, right? Because basically what you're doing there, mine were giftable. You can see them on the the instructions on my Medium page. Basically the idea is you're writing down your seed words, you're going in on a separate MetaMask account with those seed words, then you put a little hex in there, a little bit of ETH, you stake it maximum. Now you can delete that account on the computer. You have the seed words in your hand, and you can give those to somebody in your family. Now they have staked hex, right? Because like it's controlled by those seed words. Same thing if you put it on a cold storage coin. So like the Joker's coin there, they're actually coins that have private seeds printed on them from a company that may or may not be trustworthy, but like in the end, like you're trusting Trezor anyway, and so like you're trusting MetaMask. Like I'm not saying to put all your money on this, but like if you're doing a little gift to somebody and you're wanting to gift, like you're gifting staked hex, like that's possible. And like the reason you can't sell that on the open market is because like the Joker, as like as far back as we go, as much as we like each other, like you wouldn't pay me as much as I wanted for a stake that basically like I would have no way to prove to you that I didn't keep a copy of the keys, right? And then we'd have to wait 15 years. So like if I'm gifting it to you, then it's cool, because like again, game theory, like what incentive do I have to like
maybe a contract,
the gift back? But so like with the Gnosis safe technology, like that's an example. The idea of that is that you don't see your private keys because they're held in a safe on the blockchain that you can interact with and make signatures from, but like you can also transfer it to somebody else, and it's provable that nobody's ever seen those seed words and nobody will, like without your control. And so like that's an example of just from a theoretical and practical perspective, like how you could create tradable T-shares, right? Is like just using that Gnosis safe technology that StakeWrap is using to do social recovery. And so like, people can learn more about that, from the other streams, but that, the idea is, so I mean, it is possible, but like, and I'm not saying just because I've been thinking about it longer than most people means like I'm right, but like, let's just consider one of the main arguments and the way that this is being sold to the community is the idea that it'll only create buying pressure because you have to buy in hex. So you have to buy the hex to be able to buy the tradable T-shares, right?
By the way, I think my mother donated to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I was going to shout that out. Like, I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Very generous. And so like, that's not true, because every time you buy hex, there's USD on the other side. So like, you could say it however many times you want. You could say like, it only creates buying pressure. It only creates buying pressure.
Yeah, but someone's.
And you could say a bunch of other stuff that's true around that, but like, it doesn't. And like, what it actually does is it takes buying pressure out of the system that forces you to decide whether you're going to keep it liquid or you're going to lock it, and then you're going to keep your promise. and it transports it into a system where middlemen take their little fee or their big fee, and and then they pull all the buying pressure that would go into HEX into this layer 2 scenario. And it's just like the example that I would give is the same reason why Richard never promoted HEX to be a transactional currency. I could sell you this microphone for HEX. Well, if I wanted to make that a business, it costs something to make this. And so I'd have to sell that HEX, at least part of it that you gave me, right? Like everything except my margin, I would have to sell it in order to pay my costs to make the microphone. And so you're forcing when you buy something in a cryptocurrency, most of that has to be sold, right? In order to pay for the item that you're buying.
Can I go get a drink real quick?
Absolutely.
No, you may not.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude, okay? Give me one moment.
Yeah, Maddie, I definitely hear what you're saying, and for sure, I'm sure you have put tons of thought into this, and I completely trust you have been thinking about this for a long time, and so they're all really, really valid points. I just I guess to my earlier point, I just think someone is going to try, and I think it's just going to fail. That's my feeling about it. And the reason is I actually don't think that what's the best way to describe this? Okay, so if you are someone on HexBay who is selling a stake, there's actually much more bargaining power on the buyer's side than the seller side, because if you have, say, a 15-year stake and it's now you're only a year into it or something like that, if you were going to get out of that stake in some other way, you would have to emergency unstake, and then you'll just lose all of your money. So I think the buyers are always going to be undercutting the sellers. So there actually isn't, and look, this is just my thinking, but to my thinking, there isn't actually that much of an incentive to be selling your stakes, because there's going to be the fee on HexBay. Plus, I think you're going to get under market price, for the reason I was just saying, in that the only other way for you out of that stake is an emergency unstake, which completely nukes the whole thing. So people are going to be bidding kind of under market value. That's what I would think will probably happen, and I could be totally wrong, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. So to me, that's it's just sort of this ancillary thing that's happening, and I don't think it really captures the value of the layer 1 in a way that would threaten the HEX layer 1 as it stands. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, people may hedge, and do some staking on layer 2 when they don't really understand how much it's costing them to leave that flexibility in the system, and that the flexibility is being paid to the middlemen, and to people who are just playing games with the part of HEX that's supposed to be the core, which is the time locking aspect and holding yourself accountable. It's all of a sudden, my future self is expecting some money to get there. It never shows up. It's kind of like in Back to the Future, everything that happened in the movie, and then the next movie after that, and the movie after that, things are always not showing up places, and that's because they're time traveling. Turns out, just go through the fourth dimension like everybody else, 1 minute at a time, and
do it the most efficient way. And again, I think this is why HEX layer 1 wins ultimately, because people try, they eventually figure out they're getting wrecked, and then they just go back to buying their HEX and staking their HEX for 15 years.
Well, listen to this, right? So usually in traditional means, right, a lot of people that don't do things traditionally tend to fall short, right? A lot of people discredit, education, for an example. And interestingly enough, when I think Johnny from our community, Johnny Chaos, he tweeted about us being, there he is. He tweeted about us being like, psychologists, and he was really happy that there was this community of psychologists that are professionals, to be within our ranks. And one person really jumped up and said, "I have a psychology degree too. These other people are cool." And I'm like, okay, well, it's kind of discrediting like what we do, and not only that, but it discredits, as far as the traditional means of going to school and getting a profession and that kind of thing. A lot of people kind of frown on that, but in reality, that's always proven to have a pretty successful life, right? I mean, I think people who go to college have more of a probability of succeeding than those who do not. Not saying that, there's others that, haven't gone to college and did succeed. There are those people that are out there. However, it's important to note that the traditional way is traditional because it's proven to work, right? And I think that's where HEX stands, right? It's proven to work. Stick with what's working. No reason to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
It's the threat that we're facing though is that like there's basically like creating fake versions of HEX is like super profitable, right? And so that gives them like more power and like, more of a marketing budget and like more of a budget to like, oh, now there's a referral system, it's like all of you people who are, quote unquote, like streaming or, I'm not going to say wanting to make a living because really HEX streamers seem to be a little bit different than everybody else and making their living off of.
Most of us have like actual jobs,
and like keeping their jobs. Yeah. But like, nonetheless, I'm already seeing like the old system trying to build itself into HEX, and like that's what we're talking about is like centralization. And I think it's just super interesting. I look at HEX, like my experience within it, as like the start of a really long video game that I didn't know I was playing. And like, I don't even know that much about video games. But I see like Richard, like what's his move right now? Well, I've never heard Richard give a half-ass opinion about anything until it came to like encapsulated stakes. And so I just think it's interesting because like, again, part of this idea that like HEX is going to be different, like HEX is not going to rebuild the old system, like HEX is going to stay decentralized. Whose job is it to like set people straight on this? It'd be so easy. It would take Richard 10 seconds to just tweet out like encapsulated stakes are a scam, nobody use them, and then like problem solved. But like, it's not, but that's centralization. Like it's our job to figure it out and to see the clues and to like bring it to the people and to form a consensus, like to stick with the thing that can't be changed instead of dealing with the thing that like is going to have a bunch of bugs or like all kinds of other stuff going on with it. Because when people get scammed out of their HEX and they do these layer 2 things, the people who are scamming them, they're going to dump it on our heads, or they're going to build like their share in the system with like basically bad actor intentions. And so if we, just like with Bitcoin, like sure enough, a bunch of billionaires, now they're buying into it and everybody's cool with it. Like, oh, that was my price. Like to give up freedom, to like give up this experiment that we're doing in like decentralizing the free world instead of centralizing it more. Like, I think it's our job and I think it's really important. And I'm excited to be here with you guys. Like, just like making up a bunch of weird ideas about why we should, why we should take this whole like staking thing and keep it on layer 1.
I think It's really difficult to keep the mindset of decentralization, because there's always going to be, and I hate to say it this way, don't crucify me for this. There's always the people who are leaders and there's the people who are followers, right? Whether a lot of people like to believe it or not, people tend to want to follow people, right? And some more than others, right? So in essence, that centralizes things to an authority, right?
Yes.
Sheeps belong to a shepherd, right? And again, I'm not saying everyone's a sheep, but at the same time, if you're not a free thinking individual, and say you listen to a Tone Vase or a Bitcoin Maxi or somebody who's like, hey, layer 2 is the best thing on God's green earth, and let's do that and blindly follow them, because there's people out there that are like that. Well, then now you're part of the problem, right? The solution is decentralization and to make you into your own fisherman. Don't seek a fish to eat for a day. Learn to fish for life, right? Be that
Be
person.
the fish.
Yeah. Be the whale, right? Don't be led by people, right? I mean, listen to the message, formulate your own opinions. But at the same time, we are trying to make sure that you are a self-sufficient person who doesn't follow a centralized authority, right? But again, that's another problem with humanity. Eventually, things become centralized, like DLive did. It is what it is.
Yeah.
We got to find we need to find solutions.
Like Alexander the Great, conquered so much and then it fell apart. So it went from centralized to decentralized, right? And once upon a time, Britain was, controlling everything. Then America split off and said F you, we're not paying taxes on tea anymore, And so I mean, I just see this continuous experiment with freedom, women had no rights for all of history, hundreds of thousands of years, and then they did, right? And that's such an amazing thing. I could start crying right here on stream, right? Because that's half of humanity, at least in the free world. Now we're gonna give freedom to everybody, right? And different.
We're regressing now, though, aren't we?
We are. Yeah. It is a battle, right? Because all of a sudden now it's well, we can print as many dollars as we want. And Janet Yellen, she can get $9 million every time she speaks to the bankers about how much money she's going to print them, and that's all documented, and that's bad. And so it's
it's no longer, against women or racism. Now it's classism. Now it's the rich and the poor. The rich want to do things like the Robinhood app to stop you from trading. People want to hold on to their money and they don't want anyone else to have it. No, you can't. Bitcoin, let's centralize it. Why is it decentralized? We want to make sure we regulate it.
And this is the conversation. It's kind of what we were speaking about earlier. Is there a way for us to protect ourselves from this aspect of human nature that appears to be perennial, this part of humans that tends to defile, pure ideas and corrupt them and turn them into, the opposite of what they're supposed to represent? Is this something that we can reasonably hope to, protect ourselves against in HEX? Because to be honest,
there's a tragedy. There's a tragedy right now with that. There's right now, anything that is seen as truth or anything that's hey, here's the problem, right? Look at this. If you were to show that to an opposing party that doesn't really believe in the other side, that's very closed, well, that's being discredited as drama now. That's being said, well, you're being dramatic. Get that out. I don't want to see no negative.
Yeah.
And let me use an example that happened literally a week ago. There was this individual in this new streaming platform that came out called Glimish. Don't go to it, by the way. It's not what people think it is. But one of their admins was there was this person on the Discord that said, fix the Discord. That was dramatic. So I had to make sure I booted him because it was negative. They didn't want to dig deeper to see what that meant. Yeah. But that's where we're headed. There is no open forum.
Yeah. That's so upsetting.
like when it comes to HEX, like one cool aspect is, you only have to have one moment of clarity, right? Like in order to start the stake, and now you can at least guarantee, right, that you're going to keep yourself honest. So like if we stop thinking about how to like break that part, like we start thinking about like what can we build on layer 2 that makes HEX better, not what makes it worse, right? So like if we are talking about like decentralization, we are talking about like trust and all these other things, like wanting to change our own behavior to be trustworthy, even maybe when we do get more power than we ever thought possible, right? Or if we continue to like attract people, especially in a bear market, the first 100x, like that'll change your life. And then like, the next 100x and then 100x on top of that, like, that's going to come faster than people realize. But I think this whole idea of encapsulated stakes, like, let's encapsulate stakes to like make the world a better place and like make our own behavior better, instead of like making it so we can just like get out of the time lock we promised, or like deluding ourselves into, hedging our own honesty.
Maddie, if I were to say to you right now, HEX sucks, what would you do?
I don't know. Like,
Trick
are you
question.
saying it?
No.
I would probably tell on you to bit finesse and then like let him handle it.
Trick question, right? Would you attempt to educate me?
Good question. Like,
It would kind of depend. Hey, if I thought, okay, this is where the not so nice side of me comes out sometimes.
yes.
Because sometimes I start thinking about, like, I really do believe that we are very likely going to become incredibly wealthy, like far more than we probably even imagine at this point. And I actually sometimes catch myself kind of thinking, like, if this person seems like a bit of a D-bag, do I want them in? Like,
would you,
like that actually crosses my mind sometimes.
So obviously I'm 100% into HEX. I love HEX. But the point I'm trying to make is, along the mindset of these negative players that are out there, right? Like they're obviously out there for whatever reason, right? But there could be people that really don't understand HEX, right? And I think a lot of live streams, like for example, the one that Maddie Allin has right here, is really along the lines of educating, right? What I like to do on my streams, right? There's people that they would come up and they'll be like, F HEX, whatever. It's this, that, and the other. It's a scam. I don't ban them at all. Like, I'm like, you know what? Why do you think that way, right? It's more like an iceberg, right? So we're looking at the tip, but I want to get down into that. What's making you do this, right? And if I see that it's obviously malicious just to mess up with the HEX name, oh yeah, haha, it sucks because whatever. Oh well, they don't give me like an answer that it seems like this because it's it seems kind of scammy and whatever. If that's the case, fine. I don't mind having that conversation, right? And I think many of us Hexicans wouldn't mind having that conversation,
for sure,
which makes us different than a lot of others, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen hexologists come out and be like, well, what, yeah, you guys are coming out saying scam, but here's why it's not, right? And he goes through the process of explaining that. The same thing goes with Maddie Allin. Same things with Balliet Brand, Discourse Syndicate. We all have this. We want to educate you so you understand that not only this is a very good product, not only that Richard Hart had every opportunity to run after the big payday, but look, we're still here. We're still doing our thing. We're trying to get everybody as aboard so this way we can essentially be successful together, right? That's where we differ. And in humanity, a lot of other projects are like, F you, and they're banning you and getting rid of you. Well, we're not like that, and that should tell you something.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because when you see that level of censorship, that's when people are really insecure about whatever it is they're advocating for or believe in. Like if they can't handle that, base level of, disagreement or, helping to educate someone who doesn't understand the system, if they can't do that, then either they don't understand the thing that they're advocating for, or deep down they know it's garbage. So like it's kind of like one or the other. And yeah, I think anybody who's really trying to censor another point of view, that's when I start to see some red flags and alarm bells going off.
Yeah, I mean that shows that they want things centralized, right? So it stops at their opinion. There's no open forward. It stops right here, right? And that to me is like, you're not what you say you are, right? But we're so open. It's really amazing that HEX is like, and maybe that's why I'm so drawn to this coin, because I'm 100% anti-censorship. 100% I don't like this narrative that's going on within the world where you can't disagree. You can't be like, well, I don't believe in what you're saying because of A, B, C, and D, and the other person can't have a adult conversation to kind of like match where you're at and try to come to an equal consensus. Yeah. And that's where HEX it shines, Oh
yeah, there's so many things I could go into with what you just said, but something that's like coming to mind, and maybe like both of you could let me know your opinions as well, is that social media's had this perhaps expected effect, perhaps unexpected effect of creating a society of people that has become much more narcissistic than its predecessors, and I think that trait, that narcissistic trait that seems to be now elevating in the population, is actually contributing to and maybe driving this inability for people to disagree. Because like if you think about what that is, like what that represents, when I can't even entertain someone disagreeing with me, what is that? That's like pure narcissism, right? How dare you think something differently to me? You couldn't possibly think differently to me because I'm right. Like, and there's no way that I can't be right. That's kind of what I'm saying, is that there's this narcissism in the air that's basically making it impossible for people to have like genuine conversations anymore.
It's so true. And not only is it where they can't disagree, it's like anything that is said bad about them. It's like even a person literally can commit the most gruesome, grotesque crime, and it would be okay in the eyes of their following, and it would be justified by the people that believe in them. And it's so sickening. So let me give you an example. Is it okay I could keep talking about this, Maddie? Because it's going to get a little deep, man.
What's the preview?
So, the insurrection.
Which one?
The one January 6th.
Which one?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I mean, I want to hear it.
So I'm going to talk in terms of DLive. I'm sorry. This is the best example I can give you. So there's a platform by the name of DLive, and it allowed racism to occur on its platform for all of 2020, and it actually stimulated enough traction with their with this narrative where all these racist streamers and whatnot came together, and they became a very extreme group, and it developed into an attack on the nation's capital. Okay. All the way up to that point, right? People were literally live streaming this from the service, right? Yeah. Only when they were being scrutinized and acted or spoken to from Congress that they started, we banned those people or whatnot. They kind of like try to cover up their tracks. Well, the thing is, right, that platform has a couple of staff members that are very egotistical in certain ways. And the little puppets that surround them were literally enabling the platform to not only continue, but say, yeah, they're fine. They took care of them. They're not at fault. They had no purpose in funding them or whatever, right? So literally validating their claims.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, in today's society, there's a lot of like, and the reason why I'm making that point is because there are people that can literally fund racism and fund domestic terrorism. And there's people that are surrounding that one individual entity or person that are enablers to that.
Yeah.
So that's why this narcissism exists, because on the internet in this day and age, on Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth, they are looking for that one thumbs up, and that one thumbs up says they're right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
for sure. And that's kind of like how the like construct of narcissism operates as well, right? Because you've got the full-blown narcissist, and then around them tends to be these people that are like colloquially known as the flying monkeys. So the flying monkeys are basically like, they're the people that like do the bidding of the narcissist. So I think it comes from like Wizard of Oz or something, the term.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're seeing that as like these kind of groups are developing around these like fairly like narcissistic figures. But then around them, you've got these almost like covert narcissists, in that like they're so fully like identified with that kind of top guy that they just end up almost like unconsciously just like carrying out their agenda, and it's creating some really weird like pockets on the internet, I'd have to say.
Well, I'm not sure that I like what I'm hearing, that one thumbs up doesn't mean that I'm right. So I'm going to now end this stream because I'm not willing to hear anything that I don't agree with. Just kidding. So I really love this conversation because it really does relate, right? Like the social networks that, you know, and how they're operating on our human psychology, right? And our interpersonal dynamics, like within this technology space, like it does matter, right? Like to freedom, it does matter to like people's well-being, like, or to their illness, right? And it all comes back, I think, in the end to like power and money and like these different structures. And one of the facts that I find like the most interesting to my psychologically minded mind is this idea that there are about 8 billion people alive today, and there are about 10 billion people who have ever lived in the history of the world.
That's really interesting.
So if you think about all your favorite characters who are psychopaths, like in all of history, like there's 1-to-1 ratio of like people alive today who are like out there creating mayhem, but they call it government, and they're working their way up like the CEO ladders, right? And like they are like controlling things at like a much higher level, right? Because like when you have 8 billion people and like, you know, some small percentage are like super smart psychopaths, then they're able to change the narrative.
Myself, yes.
That's what I call genius is controlled crazy.
Yeah.
If you can control that one level of like, you know what, there's this madness, but I know how to use it and just put it where it needs to go. It's controlled crazy. Genius.
But I think when you start to factor in like the psychopathic element, like that, it gets a little bit scary because of exactly of what Maddie's talking about. In that, if you survey, you know, top CEOs and top government officials, you're getting these scores that are reading really high on psychopathy. Which, you know, what is psychopathy?
Majority of Fortune 500 CEOs rank in the, you know, classify as a psychopath,
as
sociopath.
So their nervous system does not allow them to feel guilty when they screw people over.
Yeah.
so
would be my definition.
Yeah,
So
they
there's
do.
there's basically low empathy, and there's also this like but okay, so they've got no emotional empathy, but they have something that's called cold empathy, which means they're really, really good at reading what people are going to do and how they're going to react and what their behaviors are going to be, and they can predict very, very well, which is why you know, people kind of fall into the trap of thinking there's some kind of like Illuminati conspiracy controlling everything. Like, no, that's not the case. What you have is potentially a small group of individuals with very, very similar psychological profiles. And those psychological profiles tend to make them very adept at actually controlling and influencing populations. And that's actually kind of what's going on. And so, I mean, to me, that just opens up like a million questions of like, how did this happen? Why is it happening? Why are we as a society kind of reinforcing these types of like profiles?
Because people relate to them.
That's scary.
people relate to them.
Okay.
Generally speaking, those types of individuals have gone through some form of traumatic experience, right? I don't think it was something that was again, nature versus nurture, right? I don't think it's genetic. I think that it was a learned thing, right? So they've seen things in society that has happened to, say, their family members, or maybe they themselves were bullied and trashed on and whatnot, to the point of them saying, you know what, I need to fend for myself and screw humanity, and I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of myself and grow into where they need to grow into. And in that kind of realm, say if they're born into money, well, now they don't just have that hate towards, like, say, the other sons in those rich families, but now they have the resources to be that cold. It's really, I think it deals with upbringing. It's very much nature.
When we look at the system as like operating probably from like game theoretical like dynamics, like we would see that there's this like natural equilibrium, if you want to call it that, between like the extractors of value. It's like a host and a parasite. The parasite, like it doesn't want to destroy the host, but it wants to get like as close as it can get to like extracting everything that it has, right? And so like that just like really interests me to apply to like this idea that the world now it's finding an adaptive side. Almost there's like an adaptive side, or there has to be, to like having psychopaths in charge. Like the psychopaths, like they're having basically to be balanced off by like how far people are willing to be pushed. But at some point, like you get all this energy like coiled up, or like you get an imbalance in the system, and then like the system develops something to like swing back into equilibrium, or fail, right? Like in nature, like things die. And so like it points me in the direction of something Stephen Hawking like settled on before he died, was to say that he wasn't sure if intelligent life. So there's like the Fermi's paradox, or something like, why haven't we heard from intelligent life if like there's been infinite number of years and like infinite number of planets and this and that. And like one like dark conclusion that he reached was like, well, maybe intelligence, like competitive intelligence, like evolves always faster than like rules and like governance. And so every society that's ever lived, like they blew themselves up because like they had the same problem with like intelligence growing faster than like organization, or like, like government, community, that sort of thing. And so like, it's this experiment that's been run like a million times before. And it always failed. Like, well, guess what? That's the thing about things repeating over and over again. Like this is our chance to be different. And like, there's never been, as far as I know, I don't see any signs that there's been any people who came before us who invented HEX and like it didn't work out. So like that's got to be some sort of bias that makes it true, right? Like,
or it could
that
be
this time is going to be
multidimensional.
different, and that if you take away the power, if you take away that economic energy from the psychopaths, like enough, then that balances out the system to like allow you to have organizational structures in the world. Because like we need to be accountable to something. And like, you know, I just recently realized like, oh, my boss is a middleman, right? But like the solution, I mean, you need something to motivate you. But I think this invention of a type of money that's programmable, that hasn't been centralized yet, or like it's got a plan to be decentralized, as the OA like gives away Genesis coins to the people who stake the longest in the system. Like basically what we're setting up is a system of actual programmable money where you could pay yourself to be accountable for things. And then that removes like our need to rely on psychopaths or like something that approximates them to like keep us motivated and honest, right? Because like I can't pay myself to quit smoking tobacco cigarettes, or I can't pay myself to like save for the future if all I have is like paper notes, or I have to like go, you know, to an external source, a centralized like party, in order to like regulate my own behavior.
I do have a question though. Speaking in terms of you paying yourself. So in your system, the payment system with the crypto or decentralized assets, the initial payment would essentially come from you, right? So like say you want to pay yourself, or you want to set up a payment plan where Bitcoin pays you or pays you $1,000 worth of Bitcoin if you accomplish say quitting smoking, right?
I want to be paid in HEX. If I'm paying myself.
So all right. So say right now you make the determination you want to quit smoking. You put $1,000 in HEX in this system, and you lock it until you quit smoking, and then it pays you, right? Is that what?
Can I say something really quick before I forget? Like in brainwaves, like we can like lock things based on time, and then we can see like what the brain pattern is electrically, or like we can lock it to the behavior of interest, and then we get like an event related potential, or like you know, basically you could have time locked or behavior locked. And so like basically what this programmable money would do, it would create a use case for HEX that would be basically utilizing the technology of encapsulated stakes, not to allow people to break their promise or make like weaker promises, but instead like you can lock your HEX in order to like have a savings account, and that's time locked, or you could lock your HEX in order to create behavior change, which your HEX would stay locked and be accumulating interest until you right. do the behavior change.
Right. Okay. So the initial payment is kind of like, I guess, where I'm fuzzy, because
it can come from anywhere.
Right.
External,
that's what I'm saying.
Or internal.
Okay. So that's where okay. So it could come from yourself, or it can come from a colleague or somebody who wants to help you change. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the stronger approach would be like a colleague paying you, or somebody like that. Yeah. So if, say, for instance, you pay yourself, the initial payment could act as like not a punishment, but it could act as a punishment, because you're taking away something you value, which is fiat currency. Whereas, say, like you work together with a colleague where the colleague pays you, then you do the same thing for the colleague later on. Right. So I think that would be a better method. You understand my point?
Yeah, that was sort of something I was like thinking through as well, like that kind of interpersonal factor within the incentive. It seems like there may be more incentive if there's like some social dimension or some interaction that's going on with someone else.
That goes back to like the point that you guys made earlier about how like some people don't care about money. But like most people who aren't psychopaths care about like other people.
Yeah.
And so I think it would make sense, especially to like, I mean, if you have like, So basically you have like an oracle problem whenever you try to do something like what I'm talking about, right? Like, how do you know the truth of like whether the behavior changed or not? Like, what are you just going to have devices that measure everything? And then like, again,
Well, you
it
also
doesn't
have to
have to
see
be perfect.
extinction.
Like, with the Fitbit example, like that's ready to go. Like with the Apple Watch, same thing. Like there are some behaviors that like would be extremely easy to measure. How many times you checked your phone, how many times you checked the price of HEX, like that all is like, it's ready to go, like basically programmed already to like, decide whether you did it or not, with like a reasonable amount of truth. But then when you move into like more complicated behaviors, like whether you smoked or not, like either you're going to have to make new hardware that like, or you're going to have to get creative, or you could have a social validation system. And I think like recruiting somebody else to validate whether you changed your behavior or not, that would create a virality component. Like it could also create like a layer of like a favor system. So instead of paying HEX to do this, like we're getting towards the edge of like how much I've thought about this aspect, but like how would you tie it into HEX, but like also use social capital or like social reinforcement as like, because money, it started out being just favors, like we think, because the first human records that have ever been found, it was counting out like how much you owed somebody. And so like the invention of money goes earlier than the invention of like, recorded history, literally. And so like, so there's lots of interesting theories about like how money started, because it's older than recorded history. But like a lot of people think that it started out with favors. And so I think that you could have the favor of like, if I check your behavior, you check mine, and then like you can bootstrap the system much easier.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show like whether we like to admit it or not, how fundamental like economics are to our behavior, like both individually and collectively as well. It's like, I think what we've been seeing, like at least from in like an outsider's point of view in the United States over the last 3 to 4 years, is basically a system that has reached its threshold of how much inequality it is willing to tolerate. And what you like when you start to see in systems that have become too unequal is like a lot of the stuff that's been kind of going on, like the rise of populism, for example. So you get figures like Trump beginning to rise up. You get like social unrest. We've been seeing obviously like rioting and all that sort of stuff. And censorship is also like usually another big kind of symptom of inequality in a society. And so we can start to notice like how much economics play into like our social environment as a whole, because these are pretty profound effects that we're talking about. And to me, like I think essentially what we're beginning to see is that the psychopaths have sucked too much economic energy out of the system and banded it off for themselves, and the system is reacting to that now. And this usually like starts to signal like, I don't want this to be like a black pill either, but it's often like a signal of like the demise of a social organization or a social structure. And so I think that's essentially kind of what we're seeing here, is that there's an economic system that's been like squeezed for all it's worth by what you might say are some bad actors. And, but the hopeful side of that is that we're also seeing like simultaneously the building up of something new where, freedom is still available and the psychopaths haven't fully taken over yet.
Yeah.
And they're incentivized to not destroy us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's in their best interest to not. Yeah.
But
Just like
who
it's in
gets the
their best-
upper hand? And technology, it moves in like steps and leaps, right? And so like, oops, they thought they had Bitcoin under control, because they're buying it up. Like, how easy would it be for the U.S. government to go like knock on Brian Armstrong's door and be like, hey, everything you hold in Coinbase, that's ours now. And like Grayscale and like the miners in China, like like I have no idea what percentage of Bitcoin is actually held by individuals, but I'm pretty sure like it's all just Trace Mayer who like created the proof of keys movement, and he's the only one who actually holds his own keys, which doesn't help anything either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Hex, it's the default. It's the default that you went through the automated market maker. There's so many like nuances that are so genius and like different than everything else, right? Like the rise of Uniswap as like all of a sudden the exchanges, they couldn't insert themselves in between us and the thing that has value to the point where like they make the price and fake a bunch of volume, and like you can never really know
That's
like
true.
who owns what.
That's
And
they have that power.
Yeah.
So it's like so beautiful. It's like have the default in Hex be like, oh, you had to mint your own. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, it's awesome. And just how transparent everything is, like how much information can be gleaned from, individual actors, and how people can, start making plans and preparations. Like we all know that there's this huge stake coming out on the 15th, and we can theorize and devise what we're going to do, same as anybody else. Like that level of transparency, I think, is another thing that really, sets it apart from other cryptocurrencies. And if you look at something like Bitcoin being mostly traded on these like centralized exchanges, where there's so much stuff can be done to like obfuscate, what's actually going on with any one trade. If you look at even just the relationships between miners and those centralized exchanges and all that sort of stuff, there's so much kind of that we don't have to deal with in Hex, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, we didn't even have to worry about whales coming and wrecking our bags. It's designed so they can't do that.
Yes. It's insane. And so they're going to have to innovate in order to keep up with Hex. They're going to have to create HexBay and like try to trick people, because they can't buy it on the open market like they're used to, right? Like, and they can't just like create a bunch of fake volume on the exchange and like create a bunch of bots, that buy it before you sell it, and like then give you a lower price. And then like when you want to buy back, and then it pumps the price. And then whenever you want to buy back in, it gives you a higher price than is the reality. Like Hex is a truth engine, like, because you're not just holding it and you're not just trading it. Like there's another option. You can burn it, and send it to your future self. And like, how are they going to get it that way? That's why there's so much gatekeeping. And like, turns out the gatekeeping is like essential. Like if we didn't have gatekeeping, we would have a problem, because it would mean that the centralized entities are getting access, and they're not, and they're pissed, and they're telling everybody on YouTube, like BitBoy, like you are not allowed to talk about this. Like, and then they even slip up and they talk about it, right? Because they get so triggered, and they like believe this false narrative of like Hex is a scam, and like they're just building their cognitive dissonance like more and more. Like it's not going away, and like they're looking at their masters, like who say like you're not allowed to get outside of the basement, BitBoy. Like we've got you locked up forever, like working for us, like telling people to buy this and that, right? To margin trade, and like the whole game is changing before our eyes, and feels pretty good.
It feels great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are what are some more holes or like things that you would use like programmable money for when it comes to behavior change? Like how's it gonna work?
Behavioral modification. Really the way that you were explaining it is a really good way to do it. Reinforcement is always a path into behavior. Other ways to modify behavior, really, you'd have to stimulate some form of an emotion to do that. It has to be a memorable experience. So, but the way that you're doing is really it, reinforcement theory.
I mean, you definitely identified like people who don't care about money. They would need some other form of motivation.
Oh, well, I mean, there's different motivators, right? So it's very individualistic. So you'd probably look at some people, food is a motivator. Some people, love and affection is a motivator. Some people, attention and that kind of thing is a motivator.
I'm going to take some notes.
So, it all depends really, on the individual and how they classify or what they classify as a motivator is. And also, if you want the behavior to persist, you have to do it with a specific schedule of reinforcement, right? So you have the different schedules of reinforcement, which I think it's ratio, if I'm not mistaken. I might mistaken, but it's really the one with the stop machine where you keep pulling on it until randomly you get what you want. That's the most, I guess, the most effective way of reinforcing a behavior. The one thing, though, that I'm a little concerned about is extinction. How do you maintain it, right? Because there's ways where the behavior will just, come back in a way that, is crazy, right? So an example would be somebody who quit smoking, and then one day they have a feel that they want to smoke, and they're smoking a whole pack that day.
Yeah.
How do you limit that with this situation? Would you have like a pocket of money for that occurrence only? So when you feel like it's going to happen and you feel like you're about to regress into the behavior, do you say, all right, if I don't do it, I can open up this bag, right?
After they get their like bonus payment from themselves for like quitting smoking, then like their smart wallet never again lets them complete a transaction for buying cigarettes. Like, sorry, your money is no good here.
So what about fiat though? They'd still be able to access cigarettes through fiat currency.
What about fiat? There's not going to be fiat in the future. I mean, like all you have to do is make it like less convenient for people, and then you like decrease like make them work harder to like get their addiction done, and then like at some point, if you make it hard enough, and like it stops more than it persists, or like it decreases at least, right?
So,
and that's the way we have to look at this system is like, it doesn't have to be perfect. There's going to be tons of holes in it, but like, that's why it will evolve by just, implementing like the principle of like, make it more inconvenient to not change the behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
I wish it was so cut and dry, because like, if you speak in terms of cigarettes, right? What's to stop them from bumming a cigarette from someone? You know what I mean? Like, like what if they have an enabler in the house, and they're not a smoker, but their wife's a smoker or their husband's a smoker, and like they see the person, the system can't see me smoking from them, so I'm gonna do it. Unless they do like a sample for like nicotine in the blood, like, and then at that point, like every time they do it, it unlocks every month or something. Right, that could be a way to reinforce it all the time. And
yeah, you might need some like specific ways of kind of tracking and measuring. But I think it's like kind of goes to what Maddie was saying about the fact that like most likely you're not going to be able to make like a really kind of perfect system that scales across, millions and millions of people. Because humans are so complex, and the drivers of behavior are more than just like behavioral as well, right? Like you can kind of get into other kind of theories of why certain behaviors occur and why addiction occurs in the first place. Is it a traumatic response? Is there some memory that needs to be processed? Is there some other kind of psychodynamic reason going on? And so there's obviously all these things, but like as to what Maddie was saying, like it's almost kind of the same thing with HEX, because when you're in HEX, you could still buy a shit coin. You just don't want to as much like, you know what I mean? So like it's the same, if you can create that like a kind of close enough is good enough sort of situation, where people are just, the tendency is like the inertia is more towards like extinguishing the behavior. And I don't know exactly the mechanics, but if
you don't want to buy BTT,
like like aligning the incentives, it like attracts the behavior that you want if you program like the incentives just like good enough, right? And I think like, yeah, so I think like that's really like the answer maybe to that question, because I really like the example that you just gave of like bumming cigarettes. And I think like, you know, this could all be like very dark if like it's coming from an external source, you know, like the government says like, you know, if you smoke, then like you don't get to eat, or, you know, like something like it has to be like, and that's a cool thing about HEX. And like, you know, everybody in Bitcoin always said, you know, like, like blockchain technology, like decentralized, it's like money is just the first app that's running on it, because like money is so valuable to like carry truth. But like, it turns out that like there are lots of other truths that you can like, that are valuable to like be sure of, or like be able to record, and like that sort of thing, you know. And like, just because like, you know, just because like a banana company wants to like track their bananas and make sure nobody's stealing them, like, you know, that's maybe not the best case for blockchain right now. But like, you know, I guess again, it's like trying to build a system, basically, you know, we already have this system in the world of like working for other people, like, and you know, like that's not perfect, and like sometimes you're distracted or off task or something, but like the incentives are there to like do a good enough job, right? And like there are boundaries, or like there are, I don't know what you call it, I mean, there's like, there are things basically set up, structures in place to like have you do kind of a little bit better of a job from time, you know, like throughout time, because maybe our, you know, like our gross domestic product is like growing over time. So like maybe we're doing things a little bit more efficiently, right? And we're like coming up with better ways of doing things all the time.
Or it's
I just
inflated.
think like this is just a whole new territory of like, oh, now I don't have to like only work for, like, you can't work for yourself. Like once you have control of money and it's like a bearer asset, and like you have it, or like, I mean, you can't pay yourself with paper money. It's not even possible to do contingency management, the most powerful thing you can do in psychology. Like literally it's all set up. So like the government pays me like lots of money, not to me, but like to people I work with, you know, who are like super low, you know, income. Like they're paying me an amount of money, like to talk to people to try to change their behavior, whenever, you know, you could just pay the people directly, or they could pay themselves to change their behavior. And that would be more efficient, more cost effective, and have a higher success rate. Because we know that when you pay people to stop their addiction, it works. It's really interesting. It's like psychology like doesn't care about like getting stuff right sometimes.
Yeah. Well, like I know here in Australia, they like over the last like 10 to 20 years, they like ratcheted up the taxes on cigarettes to like a crazy degree. And then they, you know, stop people from being able to smoke indoors, in public places, and they took away, like, you can't put any branding on the packaging or anything like that now. And I know, like, I don't know what the stats are, but I know it's like, you know, smoking is down considerably. So I don't necessarily agree in principle with the kind of centralized government policy there, but in terms of like the theory of what you're talking about, like they just made it harder to smoke, and less people smoke now.
Oh my gosh, like don't get me started on all that. The one thing I would say is like the incentives that you're creating whenever like the government's making a lot of money off taxing vices.
I know.
Is like now they don't have as much of an incentive to like eliminate that behavior for good. because like that's where their money's coming from. You know, like the United States, like it's on a state by state system of like how much you tax tobacco. And so like some states, they really need that income
Yeah.
from taxing. And so like it's basically a tax on like the poor when it comes down to it. And like,
well, that's why they allow like cigarette purchases and stuff and alcohol purchases, and it's all very much regulated based upon the person's coin, right? I mean, we all know that smoking causes cancer, right? And we all know that drinking causes big problems too. But then they can't regulate marijuana, and guess what? Now it's a big problem. How do we tax it is the question. It's no longer, oh, is it good for humanity? Well, how do we tax it? That's the big question.
Yep.
Like smoking is good for you. That's why 1 billion people do it. And like, it's a lie to say that it's bad for you. And like, that doesn't match up with the reality, right? Like if it was such a maladaptive behavior, like people would drop dead when they took their first puff. But in fact, what we find is that people who smoke tobacco cigarettes, like they use that to regulate and to like self-medicate their depression, their anxiety, their stress, ADHD. Like nicotine has like so many positive benefits. Like it's no wonder people are addicted to it, right? And like, so the message that like smoking is bad for you is like incongruent, right? And so like that's a principle of like motivational interviewing, right? It's like a therapy skill, like a therapy technique where you're like presenting somebody like the argument that they don't believe in, so that then they say, well, like I'm a smoker, and like, well, no, like smoking is actually bad, right? But like everything I've said is true, like and so like, so then I can concede like, oh, well, if you're a smoker and you think smoking isn't so great, if it's not as great as I just said, right, then maybe your argument is that it's expensive and it causes lung damage, right? And so like those things are also true. And so for that reason, you would want to help the person find a different way to, like medicate, or like not even medicate, but like use behavioral medicine to say like, oh, like you're having attentional problems. Like maybe we should treat your sleep disorder by like, removing caffeine, or by like, getting you the level of exercise that you need to like not be depressed and like have poor sleep, and then like have attentional problems and fatigue during the day. And like once you really start to look at these things, like the message that's being sent is the wrong message. And like governments know this, like professionals know this, but like, guess what? Like Medicaid doesn't pay me to talk about tobacco cessation. It's not covered. Explain that.
Right. Sounds like there's an agenda. That's what I gotta say. There's a narrative.
Deep.
Weren't like cigarettes like really widely promoted by like doctors for ages there, like back in the day? It was like, there was like pictures of doctors smoking on packets of cigarettes.
Yeah, 40 to 50% of the population used to smoke.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I worked in the field for 7 years, like under like a pretty crazy mentor who like is like a mad scientist and like super smart. And so we learned, like we discovered a lot about smoking, and, giving nicotine patches to never smokers, like putting them in different situations where like they'd be more stressed or less stressed, like really seeing the, the surprising thing is that you would think of smoking as something that's basically, well, you could get all into like, it's genetic, it's 50%, which doesn't mean anything and is false. But like, basically the idea was that we took a bunch of people who like were abnormally normal. So like basically people who like, they had no problems in their life. It's like kind of hard to find these people. And,
Do those exist?
They're not normal, but like,
are they
all
like
right, you have no sleep problems, like you've never used substances, like, you know, like obviously college population or like that age, but like,
yeah.
Are we
But,
talking
like,
about like a 5-year-old or what?
so like, you know, you could ask somebody questions for 15 minutes to like screen them to say like, never had head trauma, like you're right-handed, like you're between these specific ages, like on and on and on, like trying to find like something that maybe doesn't exist, but like the point is, like, if you want to understand like repeated measures like within subjects designs, and like if you really want to manipulate something in order to see how something changes, then like you want to eliminate as much noise versus the signal as possible. So like you want a really strong signal to noise ratio to be able to see if your intervention worked, or if like there's just
EEG?
random chance happening with EEG or measuring performance on behavioral tasks. But so anyway, like the point is, we reviewed the literature and we found that like no nicotine and tobacco researcher had ever given a subject a behavioral performance task that was really longer than like 20 minutes. And so like there was no fatigue being measured. So like the assumption was that like smoking, like the reason why people smoke is more based on traits. So like people, like they have trait deficits. So like you're depressed, or you have ADHD, or you have some like persistent thing, and that's why you smoke, is to like self-medicate that trait. But like what we proved like very easily once we looked at the methodology, we like checked our experimental methods and like, you know, what science is actually based on. We paid people lots of money to them to like basically do these like extremely long tasks. Like one was a rapid visual information processing task where like there's a new stimulus on the screen every 0.6 of a second. You have to catch like, you know, 3 odd or 3 even in a row. And so like if you do that for an hour, that's like 6,000 stimuli that you've processed. Like it's extremely fatiguing. But then there's another type of task, which is like a vigilance task, where, and I programmed these by hand, so I knew that like that they were legit. Like you have to watch the second hand of a clock. Like every once in a while it pauses for like 1.1 seconds instead of 1 second. Basically, so like that's a super boring task, like watching a radar screen or something, like something that it would just take a lot of sustained attention.
What were the results?
So the results are that like you can take people who have no trait deficits, you can put them in a state of fatigue, and they benefit from nicotine patch versus placebo patch, like the same person randomly assigned to different days. And so that proves that smoking is based more also on like state deficits rather than trait deficits. So the way to fix the addiction is to fix the environment, to make it so people aren't working third shifts whenever they're not getting the rest they need. Like,
yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like
exactly. Like it's not
like,
that hard to like.
Are
it's
you
literally not that hard to figure out. But like nobody does real science. Like nobody does good experiments. And then like, you know, then they're like, oh, well, like, then they're like, well, we don't even like science anymore in psychology. You know, that's what they told me.
Are you aware of laissez-faire?
What's that?
So whenever you're overstimulated, like in a sense of, say you're walking through a city, right? Like a really populated city, and there's a ton of different stimulus. There's cars going, sounds going off, people walking by. I'm talking about the city's alive, right? What ends up happening is your brain, in order to protect itself, it goes into a state of blasé, like a laissez-faire, which essentially kind of kind of ignores all the noise, and you're just in this like, not like a dream-like state, but more like it's more like it becomes numb to everything around it, right? So in essence, what you're saying is people being overstimulated in your experiment, what they utilize nicotine to help medicate that, right? I'm really intrigued to know if they were ever, I guess, observed that they were in this state of laissez-faire during that experiment.
So like, yeah, so you can look at like the behavioral performance. Like, it's interesting because you can have like tasks where you're sampling the attention rate, like because somebody's responding to a target that's infrequent. So like that's the example of the rapid visual information processing task, where we actually had to train people to eliminate the practice effect. So we had to pay people to do like 10 hours of practice, like in this terrible task, because again, you don't want like the practice effect to like ruin the signal of like what the difference is between nicotine and placebo. And so people actually had to train in order to like plateau their performance, and the task had to be hard enough that like people would really be challenged and that they would get a score that's like not 100% and a score that's not like 0%, right? So you have to like make the task just hard enough. And so I'm not sure if this is really answering your question, but it's so like you can like design something in order to cause, I guess, laissez-faire, right? Like the right amount of like attentional fatigue to where like people are going to make like errors of omission, where there's like a target and they didn't see it because their brain just like their brain's running out of energy or something, you know?
Right. It essentially
a state of
ignores
fatigue.
So your target, your population that you pulled from, was it like a random population?
It was like very like targeted. So again, like you don't want a bunch of noise like in the people. And so it was basically like a 15-minute long like questionnaire of like, you know, do you have any of these problems? Like
that's the only bit that I'm a little bit suspicious of, because were you controlling for people kind of presenting like impression managing? So like presenting more positively than what they actually were? Because like I'm like immediately suspicious of anyone who has no problems. Like I don't think it exists. Like that's like, I think
maybe some people who self-actualized.
Like we could like there's some things that we could measure, right? Like we can take like a urine sample and a breath sample, and we could tell whether you're like a user of tobacco and like whether you're a user of cannabis and like these other things, right? And so like we could pull from a population that's like specifically like college, like you know, like ages, you know, a traditional college student, like certain ages, like, you know, in a certain place, it's like you are going to have a level of like homogeneity that's like conducive to being able to measure an effect that we predicted. Like we literally, like we were saying, it doesn't make sense that like it's only trait people. Like it should be state people. Why is there nobody saying this in the literature? Oh, it's because people are assuming that a 10-minute task or a 5-minute task is going to capture something. Like it's never been studied. There's never been somebody studying like whether state matters. Like, how did you skip over that? Like, you know, there's like almost 1 billion people in the world who smoke tobacco cigarettes, like, and you didn't figure out whether it was a trait or state. Like that's the reason why they're smoking. You know, it's to self-medicate like a trait versus a state. Like it just all makes perfect sense. And that's like, that's what we found. But
and even if there is an effect of like, let's say there was some hidden trait there in your study that maybe wasn't revealed for whatever reason, it definitely doesn't discount the fact that regardless, obviously managing the state is going to be really, really effective for dealing with nicotine like addiction. Because if you're a fatigued person who might also just have, say, a slight amount of anxiety as well, obviously the more fatigued you are and the more your resources are drained and all those sorts of things, the more likely it is that you're going to smoke. So like it makes a lot of sense in either scenario really to manage the state.
And it was like within subjects, repeated measures design, and so like you're really not even comparing like different people, but you're comparing the person to themselves on like a similar day. And we'd like cancel the experiment and reschedule it if you had to stay up late to like study for a test. Like, oh, you didn't have exactly the same thing that you ate the last time we did an experimental like study. All right, like come back when your day is exactly the same. Like that level of like control is like very crucial to being able to separate signal from noise, right? And like it's just really interesting. Like, and then you can go down the rabbit hole of like, you know, like tobacco companies, they bought like e-cigarette companies that like made bad products, and then they like subsidized the cost to like push them out to gas stations because they knew like they would try the cheapest one that they could afford. And then once they tried it once and it was like too weak, like it wasn't a strong enough amount of nicotine, like of course people are going to prefer smoking tobacco cigarettes to like a weak e-cigarette. But like they knew that like once people spent $20 to try it, they would never try it again because they already thought like it didn't work for me. It was by design. Like
it's such an underhanded tactic.
Engineered like to beat everybody else to the market who like actually made a strong enough one, and then they made it illegal to make strong enough like in some places.
That sounds like that psychopath we were talking about as a CEO.
Yeah.
Correct. It's genius. It's so smart.
Yeah, that was a smart move.
I saw this diagram the other day that I thought was interesting. I don't know how accurate it is, and I'm struggling to remember the details at this moment. But basically, they used a flowchart to trace a lot of the investment in like Bitcoin, Ethereum funds, and so forth. And there's a significant amount of this investment coming from like MasterCard, which I think which is a very interesting thing, because you'd have to think that like a cryptocurrency is meant to be like somewhat of a competitor with MasterCard, right? But yet here they are with like really significant funds in the space. So I just it kind of made me think about and maybe wonder about what it is they may be up to there.
I remember like in 2017, like they kept toggling it like to be legal or illegal to like buy on credit. And so like even if you had the money to like pay off the credit card, then like they were just always changing whether it would work or not. And like doing a lot of gatekeeping that way. So whether it's like, you know, whether it's people buying it or whether it's corporations and like all this stuff, I think is like super important. But it's like, oh, luckily we built like a system of Bitcoin, and like it seems like kind of hard to keep track of who owns what. Like,
yeah.
But I think like, I don't know. I'm just like super stoked to like have both of you in the community to like bounce ideas off of. And like, can we talk for a second about Blaze's music, because I'm a fan.
Who's Blaze's music? Oh, your music, Blaze. I'm like, who's he talking about?
Blaze.
So let's speak. Yeah, let's hear about your music.
Yeah. So like, it's definitely like a really great outlet for me, I find, because obviously you guys know, like working in psychology, it can be very like cerebral, and there can be like this element of it when you're doing a lot of like therapy that, you know, it can be taxing emotionally if you're not totally taking care of yourself well. So for me, one of my outlets is music. So it's something I've been doing for probably the last like 10 years or so. So on and off with like little bands around in Sydney, and then eventually doing some solo stuff over the last couple of years. And it's just been like an awesome fun ride. So just like first learning how to write, like it's kind of been a self-learning project that I've taken on. So like learning how to, you know, write songs and, you know, sing in key and learning how to like produce some beats and stuff like that. And then learning about the whole like complicated world of music distribution and how all that stuff works. But yeah, like it's definitely been like a really fun and like fulfilling ride for sure. So I've just like recently gone through like a rebranding. So I had like a different solo name like last year, but then like I was thinking about it, was like kind of hard to spell and all that sort of stuff. So I just decided to like shorten it. So now I'm just Blaze. And yeah, so I've got some stuff on Spotify, but I've still got to like transfer it over to the new Blaze account. So I'll pop up a link when the catalog's all in the right place, and let you guys take a listen. Who knows? Maybe one day there'll be like a HEX inspired song that I come up with, which I think could be a lot of fun.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, you're very talented, and I think we've got a link in the description to like your YouTube channel, so I hope that's okay.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Go check it out. I made that video with a friend in Sydney. He's a really talented like director and videographer, and he just pulled all that together for me, like really budget. So yeah, check it out.
So she has like legit music videos.
It's a vid, yeah. It was
They're
definitely
awesome.
it was fun. Thank you so much. That's like I really appreciate it. Yeah, we got to like air that one at a little cinema in Sydney where they host like video clip premieres and stuff like that, which was like a cool little thing for me to do. It was like the first time I'd done something like that, and yeah, I got a fair bit of like positive feedback down here.
Did you shoot both like at the same time or separately?
So I think only like actually one of them is like a full on like video. So that one I shot in. I think it was beginning of last year. I shot that one, and then the other one I have up there on my profile is just like a little made at home little kind of clip that I kind of just like threw together. So that one's not like a professional thing. Yeah, that was just more for like a little home recording thing just to test everything out. But yeah, so Heartbeat's the one that I made with Tim, and he's the director. Yeah.
Like for those of you who need to go like listen to it, like I've got a weird trick. So I listened to it like normally, right? And then like YouTube like brought me back to it. There's like some playlist called like Your Mix or something, and it's just like just automatically like pulls a bunch of stuff in there.
Oh, cool.
That it can tell as like music.
Yeah.
So like normally I just watch a bunch of like, you know, talk shows like this, but if somehow it knew like, oh, that's music that she did, so like we're gonna put it in a playlist, and so it just like switched over to the playlist, and I had been listening to something at 2x speed, which I had just recently learned how to do, and so like your music was playing at like 2x speed, and it was really good both ways. And so for those of you out there, like I just want to recommend like listen to it twice, and like, you know, the different speeds, it you know, adds something. So
I would have never known. I would have figured it would just made it like really crazy chipmunk kind of stuff, but I'm going to try that.
Maybe it was like 1.5, either like, again, you know, now everybody has to listen to it 3 times. So that's even better for the views.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks very much. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's just one of those things, like I said, it's like great to explore creativity in a different way. And I like to think I pull some of the like knowledge and some of the experiences I've had like in psychology and like kind of funnel that through the music a little bit. So like hopefully there's a little bit of like depth there as well for people to listen to.
I want to find out more about like Joker's like musical career, but first, can you like tell us like just at least what is Heartbeat, like what's that based on?
So Heartbeat's like, I guess the like point of it is that it's about vulnerability. So the song is basically all about like that first moment when you like connect with somebody and like you start to realize like, thank you so much, Jojo. That's wonderful to hear. I really hope you enjoy it. But yeah, it's like kind of all about that first moment when you start to realize like, okay, I actually really care what this person thinks, and like I'm gonna start to like reveal myself to that person, and really just like the to and fro that you go through when you're first doing that. And yeah, I guess it's just kind of like about encouraging like vulnerability and people just having that courage to like fully show who they are.
Very cool.
And that's heartbeat.
Now, Joker, were you ever in a band?
No.
No?
I'm not musically
You're so talented
talented
with performing arts. I'm
surprised. I did like musicals in high school, but I never did like
I knew
that's
actually.
cool.
Yeah. I mean, I did like a rap against D-Live, but I mean, I wasn't perfect.
I knew it.
I did a diss track.
It's not about perfection, right? It's just about expression. Hey, that's cool.
Yeah.
Musical. You remember?
But yeah, I'm not a musically inclined guy. I'm more of an actor. It's kind of what I am doing here with the Joker thing. Although I do dig a little deeply, and I kind of pull from a lot of wrongs that society has done to myself and my family. And I kind of like incorporate that into the character to make it feel more authentic. So that's why I label myself as the real Joker, because I'm literally taking the pain of society and putting it front and center. So that's that. I'm more of a streamer. You know, I stream. I've actually now started streaming on Twitch. I don't know if you've seen that, Maddie, on my Twitter.
I don't think I did. No.
Yeah, so I asked my audience if I should start up on Twitch, because I was told by a comedian that's he's actually a comedian that goes on tour and whatnot, that I should absolutely not dwarf my audience, because he found my content to be quite unique. And he said that what people usually do is if they get banned off of Twitch, they go to these other platforms like DLive or Trovo. And he's like, well, you were never banned off of Twitch. He goes, dude, you can make, a great audience and a killing on Twitch. So when I did the poll, and I was like, you know what? The Hexicans are on Twitch, as well as YouTube. So why am I like bottlenecking myself? So my audience actually concurred with that. And they're like, you know what? We'll follow you anywhere. So now I am on Twitch.
And what's your account name?
Actual_Joker.
Have to check out one of your streams.
Yeah, you might think differently after this conversation. I mean, this is me without the character. When the character comes out, it gets a little crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I like crazy. It's interesting, right? Like it's something. It's different because it's like you said, like in the character of the Joker. Like that is kind of what he is supposed to represent. It is like the sort of the pain and the failures of society and how that can impact an individual. So it's kind of cool to be playing with that in the cryptoverse as well. So yeah, I'd love to see what you're doing there.
Yeah, I do talk about Hex. I used to be a gaming streamer, like in the beginning when I first started out. And then it kind of morphed into what it is now, which is more like skit-based, wacky, fun. And then it turned into news, meaning like I report on a lot of drama that's in the streaming community.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, with my own laughter and spin on it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, awesome.
That's why I keep telling everyone, I'm like, a lot of people hate this drama thing. Like, there's so many people that are discrediting, reality, and they're calling it drama, and they're like, I don't want any part of it. And it's like, well, if you're faced with reality, you can make accurate decisions. So why not look at this perspective and make, any type of determination based upon the uncomfortable stuff that's in front of you? But nobody likes to face the uncomfortable truth. They like the
I'm a really big fan of you as well. Like for all the stuff you're saying, and so I mean, it's really awesome. The character that you've made is like incredible because it as you said, I mean, you answered all the interview questions I had like without me even asking them. When you're talking about like what the inspiration is and like what the blend is there, right? Between the real and like, the character. And I really think that allows you to connect with people in a way that maybe they're not used to. And that like even kind of, brings out, the vulnerability maybe like they were seeing in Blaze's music, you're bringing it out in your audience by being so real and showing those, that side of who we are, right? Like is the Joker.
I like being against the grain for sure. I do things that raise eyebrows like, what did he, what happened? Like I love that reaction. It's really what I go for.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I love it. And like, I mean, I guess that's like what, art and creativity can allow us to do is to like reveal these like, you can reveal more truth, through a character oftentimes than you can in other ways. Like there's this juxtaposition, like because it's kind of not real, it allows you to actually go there and like really actually start to think about it and look at something properly. Like it kind of removes that mental barrier that a lot of people have. So I like it.
Unfortunately, a lot of people these days, the attention span is not there, right? And we can all say that, right? Typically, like 17 minutes for the human attention span. So you have to keep on like, that kind of thing. So that's what I do with my character. It's like I go like I'll start like saying things and they'll start dying down and I'll just boom, 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 and people will be like, "Whoa, what just happened?" And it kind of like wakes them up, and it becomes more of like a memorable moment. And then like have you ever professed like in a university setting?
Have I ever professed?
Like have you ever been like a professor? Like
no, I've never taught. Yeah, no.
No. Okay. So typically what's a good technique is like you'll lecture, and then as you lecture, the material kind of starts like becoming cross-eyed. People don't really, they don't really pay attention. So you kind of like hit them with a joke, or you kind of like hit their attention with something that's like, oh yeah, that's pretty funny. And then like every 17 minutes, right? If you ever lecture, every 17 minutes, it's key. Okay. So this way that it helps with retaining the information. So you hit him with a joke, your material no longer is kind of dry, and then you're like, yeah, and then you talk about maybe football or something, relate to them, and then you go back into lecture. And then you keep rinse and repeating that process, and you will find that your students really retain a lot of the information.
Awesome.
So you're saying you have to like onboard people every 17 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, every 17 minutes you gotta do something that is going to be a favorable, like you present them with something favorable. You kind of, it's kind of positive reinforcement. Like you're giving them laughter, right? You're giving them attention. You're giving them that feel good, and then you give them the material, so they're being reinforced for sitting through the material. It's interesting. It works.
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense. 17 minutes. It's kind of like that like pattern interrupt thing as well. Like if you want to change someone's behavior, you are in effect like interrupting a pattern, right? And so if like the inertia is that you're going to trail off in your attention span and your ability to retain information, like having those punctuated moments, it makes sense. You're kind of breaking up that pattern or that fuzz that people fall into. So that's a nifty little trick.
Yeah, and you know what? You know what's interesting? I was actually kind of like, toying with this idea with kind of like incorporating this into Hex, right? So like, you could speak about the percentage wise and the and how you're getting long term investments and you stake Hex for Quattro Cinco and you get X amount and you kind of hit them with all this information, but then if you kind of interrupt your whole spiel with like, hey, after that Quattro Cinco, I'm gonna get me a Ferrari, and I'm thinking this model. What do you guys think? The model that seems pretty good. So what happens is not only are you like teaching them about Hex, but you're kind of showing how the end result could look. And it seems very like, you almost make people's mouths water at that point, right? I mean, we all believe
Extremes.
Yeah. I mean, you could show them the extremes, right?
Or dreams, like you were talking about before, that you're looking to also blend in like people's dreams.
Exactly, and people can relate to that. You can ask your audience, like, all right, well, look at somebody in the chat. What are you looking to get? You know what I mean? Because I know what I want to get. What are you looking to get? And even the fluctuation in voice would contribute to waking somebody up. And I think that's key into really promoting the product of Hex. And not only that, but I mean, it really wakes them up to and helps them retain that information that you're giving. So this way they can also regurgitate that to their network. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's cool.
So that's what I do.
Well, yeah, and you've got a very refined process. It's no mistake that you look directly into the camera, that that you have a awesome kind of like repertoire of like not only like exactly what you've said. It's like being able to onboard people's attention and like give them those mental like cues to pay attention and to entertain them and to like it seems like you're very natural at like but I also know you've been streaming for multiple years and like refining
Very
this
refined.
so I really don't know what it is.
Well, back in the day, I didn't have really much of experience or knowledge in what I was doing. Like I said, I was a gamer. I sat there and I played video games. And I would react like the Joker would, but I never took like.
Even that's pretty funny. Even that's funny. Like that's like that would be funny to watch. But yeah.
Oh man, it's crazy. Like anything in the game, obviously I would be acting maniacally. But I started to notice like doing things very three-dimensionally also had a very good, it was very receptive. So like an example would be like this. I'll be like, say somebody's having a bad day. I'll be like, listen, come over here. Give me a hug, And at that point, like it becomes like, whoa, he's going into the camera. Or if I would point, I wouldn't point into the camera like that. I would point like this.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So even that gives it like a three-dimensional kind of feel. So you're not just getting this 2D picture. You're getting that.
That's really clever. Yeah.
Right. So
it definitely works. Yeah.
Little details like that help, and again, I really put a lot of work into this.
Yeah. You really thought about it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, and by the way, very unfortunate things happened in my streaming career. I was building on DLive. Had like almost 4,000 followers. Man, these people, like they weren't really receptive to open mindsets, and they became very like one of the arguments I made during this conversation is that they became very closed, and that type of mindset threatens content like mine, even content that relates around Hex. People getting shut down off of YouTube, people getting shut down off of different streaming platforms because we're speaking in terms of a decentralized asset that kind of is against the grain of the narrative of big business, right? So we're getting shut down for showing the newest and the greatest, and they're discounting it as this scam word or drama or whatever. And really, in all reality, we're doing things that are just a different way of doing it. But these elitists are just like they're shutting us down. And it happened to my content. My content was really displaying the truth and the uncomfortable conversation, right? Which is what the Joker does. He's against the grain. He tells you, It tells you how you suck,
Mhm.
but in reality, you kind of need that to grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I like it.
yeah, it's just kind of where we're at.
Yeah, it's really cool. So you said you're on Twitch now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will. I'll definitely head over there and check one out
Okay.
for sure.
If I see you in the chat, I'm going to call you out. I hope you know that.
Oh yeah, don't you worry. You can call me out on whatever you need.
What is your name on Twitch?
So I actually don't even have a Twitch account, so I'll set one up. I'll be Blaze something. You'll know it's me. I'll be like, hey, I'll be like Blaze Psych or something like that.
Have you thought about live streaming?
I have. I have thought about it. The only thing that's holding me back is time, basically, at the moment. So, like, I'm like essentially kind of like running a business right now, which can be kind of energy draining.
What kind of business, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, the psychology business. So,
okay.
Psychology practice. It is small. You've got a team of like 3 of us, and it's just kind of starting out. But that's the only thing is like when it gets to the weekend, I'm like, all right, brain just kind of like immediately goes into chill mode. But at the same time, I am very like motivated by this environment. Like I've been finding with myself, even I was like pretty opposed to even using things like Twitter and YouTube because I saw the censorship, I saw what was going on, I didn't like it. But I do think that this is like valuable to the world, and I'm kind of willing to like guerrilla style it and use these platforms and get the word out as much as I can. So like I am open to the idea. So long story short, I'm just basically trying to find time like that I could kind of commit to do it.
It's really a beautiful thing because you can really help a lot of people. I'm getting the sense you're a clinician, correct?
Yes, this is correct.
Got it. I'm more of an experimental psychologist. I'm an engineering psychologist that deals with finding populations and different subjects to run experiments on. So it's very important, I think, to have an outreach even on Twitch, because you yourself can do a lot more for people, not just within your setting of where you're at in Australia, but also within the world. And have you ever heard of the term publish or perish?
I have. Yes, I have.
Okay. So obviously you don't want to just stop in your office, right? So you want to expand out. Eventually what's going to be happening is you're going to have peers and different people within the psychology realm of the world. They're going to look into your business and they're going to wonder what you wrote, right? And I'm sure that there's going to be some form of a forum somewhere that's going to say, hey, Blaze, why don't you write about that, right? And this will be perfect for you to build into, where you'll be able to sell a book or something like that to help build, not only grow your business, but eventually get you into that world. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And it's like something that I've like explored like on and off like over a number of years, but like I said, just haven't kind of found the moment in time to like fully commit to. So yeah, it's definitely something I'll keep in mind. I'm very passionate about finding ways to scale and actually do things for more people in a way that's going to be more effective. So actually the guy that I made the music video with, he and I are collaborating again, but we're actually building out an app at the moment. So something that anybody can access, like obviously like the bottom level for free, and then we'll probably have some like smaller groups and stuff like that where people can get involved in more intimate settings. But it is definitely what you're saying is really really smart, and it is something that I'm thinking about is like what can I do to contribute more in a more effective way. So
oh yeah, and not only that, but I mean, think about it. Like if we're going into a day and age, and we've identified some real problems. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And if we can find ways to teach humanity to essentially, not only be the fishermen in their own way and start decentralizing and stop being in a herd of sheep and have their own mindsets and stop being brainwashed. But also we can teach humanity not to be as sensitive, not to be as, we're getting to a point. I mean, for Christ's sakes, we grew up watching South Park. I mean, like, why are we so sensitive as a society where we can't say, you know what? You said A, B, C, and D. I would have punched you in the face for that. Now you're going to the Twitter gods to censor me and you want to deplatform me and take away my voice.
And life gets so uninteresting and so bland and so like mundane, and that's depressing. Like, you need people who are saying some outlandish stuff. You need people who are entertaining and are free to like. I can't imagine trying to, honestly, like, I think what you're doing is great, because I can't imagine trying to be a comedian right now, because there's so much pitted against you, because you can't really speak the truth, and that's what, like comedy and performance art is meant to be around. Is like, you're meant to be like pointing to these uncomfortable truths about humans and human nature and but pointing it out in a funny way that everyone can kind of like enjoy. But now, like, I can't even imagine, like, if you make the wrong joke now, like, that's it, you're just banned off everything.
That is
so boring.
That's such a big problem. So I'm working with someone right now. Hopefully everything goes the way I want it to go. It is in lines of social media, and it is a app, not out yet, that will essentially cater to being able to do that again. Okay.
I'll sign up straight away.
One, and that's that's why, right? It's important for us to go in that route, because we are being censored and in line of this bullying. And I'm sorry, I have to use quotes, bullying, because bullying is a very subjective term towards the individual, right? So anybody, if I oppose any idea that you say with an opposing idea, not even insulting you or anything, it can be seen, oh, the person is bullying me. Get away from me. You're harassing me. Well, why can't I have an opposing idea, right? We're losing that ability. Yeah. And us as behavioral, well, I'm a behavioral psychologist, but us as psychologists, we need to find ways to pave the way for humanity through literature, okay? And in a way where it's easy enough to access, and it's easy enough where it just promotes a simple message. The people from the beginning of psychology until now, or any type of education until now, have made it so difficult for the normal person to understand anything. There's too much jargon involved. There's too many big words involved. Okay, there's too much in front of a person now that they don't even want to read a book. Okay, and it's funny because, like, I'm constantly struggling with this with my line of work, where we're having conversations about one or two different things, and they're utilizing words like pedagogy, or they're utilizing terms like olfaction instead of the sense of smell. Why are you going to say olfaction? Say smell, right?
It's distracting.
That's the insecurity of psychologists as well. It's like, I've got to be using all these fancy words so that people know I'm smart, because otherwise, because I think I know it's quite big for clinicians. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys, or I know, Maddie, you're a clinician as well, but this imposter syndrome that psychologists deal with. And I think, like, a lot of psychologists feel like they're kind of fakes almost, because they don't always have all the answers, and they can't solve a problem really quickly, and so they're compensating for that with all these, like, hefty words, and it's just kind of confusing for people,
Well, for the normal person, like, nobody, you cannot speak like you're the smartest person in the room. You cannot write like you were the smartest person in the room. You must dumb yourself down. I'm sorry to say this. You must dumb it down, so this way, and not only dumb it down, but trim it up. So this way, when you write your literature, it is accessible, it's understood, and it's at an 8th grade level. That's it. But we're so focused on trying to look smart and make the greatest thing and be the smartest person in the room, that we're literally screwing over humanity.
Was it Albert Einstein who said that if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you don't understand it well enough?
Exactly. I think it was.
Yeah.
But and I think we need to do that. And people like yourself, people like Maddie Allin, myself, I think from this stream until the end of the world, okay, whoever, whatever corner of the world you're in, if you are in a situation or in a position where you're teaching someone, or you're in a position or situation where you're writing a book to better humanity, or in any way, shape, or form to teach someone something, do it in a way, please. And do us all a favor where it's, number one, a pleasure to read, and number two, it's easily read. Don't write a 9-volume novel that's going to bore a person to death, right? That you wouldn't have read while you were in college.
Yeah.
Is that safe to say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the thing is, because I think people don't really read anymore, and like part of it is that problem of like, okay, things are just too complicated and they're too wordy, and the jargon, is too much of a barrier. And then you're also just kind of dealing with the fact that like the normal format for communicating online now is short form. Like that's, it's tweets, it's it's Instagram posts, it's TikTok videos for like less than a minute. And like we're lucky in that, in our community, people can sit and listen and be part of a conversation for an extended period of time, which is pretty rare. But for like the rest of the world, a person who's used to just watching a 30-second TikTok video, getting them to read a book is already going to be a challenge. And then getting them to finish the book,
or retain what was in the book.
And then retain, this is a huge, that's actually a massive task today. So, figuring out, again, the most efficient way to do that, the most effective way to do that, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And what's interesting, even graduate level students, right? So I teach in a graduate level course, and I assigned readings that were really, really, really simplistic. I'm talking like, I try my best to, I don't just say that people should do this. I do it,
Professor
right? I make
Joker.
Professor Joker. Full of surprises.
I make sure that I assign readings that are easily understood, right? Because I want to get the message out and what it is, and I want them to retain the information. So I'm not gonna get something that's, 10 chapters long, even though I'm assigned to do this, okay? Because in graduate level courses, you need X amount of hours of schoolwork on the outside while they're doing their readings for their next assignment. So I assigned something very simplistic. I quizzed on it. Why did at least 2 people fail the quiz? Like, that's where we're at, right? Even graduate level students.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think there's a theory that I was reading about a couple of weeks ago that basically was making the argument that as technology progresses, IQ declines. And I think it might be the case, hey? Like, because I think the thing is, because we're not trained to utilize like our intellectual faculties in the same way anymore, like because it's not as necessary anymore. It's kind of like a muscle that's just never gotten toned. People are kind of declining on that level in some respects. So it's, I guess, something that we need to keep in mind as we communicate with people, is that like the muscle just isn't very strong at the moment. And like, I think we kind of need to also help strengthen that muscle back up as well. I think it's good to, like you said, to encourage people to just reading again is a good thing to get people to do,
Absolutely. It's almost, a safety thing, or not safety, but a survival thing, like humanity needs to exercise that brain so we can continue progressing. But I honestly think, and this is going back to our initial statement of these, elitists, they don't want smart people in the world, right? They don't want you to have an opinion. They don't want you to have anything opposing to their, hey, this is our narrative, and if you have it's drama, you're going to be now excluded from the group. You're negative. We don't want any part of you. But in reality, you're just giving them an educated perspective on something that is a flaw in their system. Just like Maddie and Allin.
Yeah. Yeah, then the global elitists, they're going to be pretty surprised whenever Professor Joker and Dr. Blaze and mad scientist Maddie show up with a tool that allows people to pay themselves to do their homework and to pass the pop quiz and to better themselves as they go, to motivate themselves instead of relying on external motivation, right? There's going to be this new kind of motivation that's internally directed. And I really think that could, be useful in a lot of situations where people are falling short for like no apparent reason. And it's like, we don't have to figure out why they didn't do their homework. All we have to do is give them a tool and create a mechanism by which they're rewarded to do so in such a direct way, right? That is easy. Just make it easier to like motivate yourself. And then you solve like lots of things.
You know what's interesting that we haven't spoken about, and this is going to be a real problem. Artificial intelligence, right? In the private sector, right? In the private sector, we've seen, machines, through advertisements, and even just now you mentioned Google, right? Google, paired the video, right? Didn't notice the video at one point? You said it put it in a list for you.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's AI. Okay. AI is noticing these things. And what AI does, it has like this way of learning through CNNs and DCNNs, where it essentially can teach itself to get better at its job, right? To the point where it's like flawless. Okay. Now with AI in trading, for an example, I would love to know your perspective on how HEX can essentially stop or maybe do something with AI to like help itself, if that makes sense. Because that's going to be a real thing. Like AI is coming. And it's coming before your 15-year stake is up.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Hey, I think the best defense is offense with this stuff, right? So I think, a group of people who have some expertise in that area, who understand, because this is something that is outside of my realm of expertise. I get it in the theory, but when if it came to actually having to build something, I'm certainly not that person. But people who may be interested in this topic, I think it's important to be having conversations and looking at, is there a way that, we can leverage this type of technology, again, to add an extra layer of defense around HEX? Because I think, like you said, it's a reality we have to face. There's no question about it.
So let me give you guys a good perspective of how robust these systems are.
I'm so excited by this topic. I think I'm having a seizure.
So
stay with us, Maddie. We're gonna laugh years ahead.
So in AI, and this is how crazy it can get, right? So I don't know exactly what school developed this, but it was a school that developed a game of hide and seek. Okay. And in the hide and seek game, you had your hiders and your seekers. Okay. There was a little barrier in the front and a little barrier on the back. There was, on the outside of that barrier was a ramp. And on the inside of the barrier was like a little blockade. And then on the outside of the barrier was another blockade. Right. And in the beginning of the game, the seekers were on the outside of the barrier and the hiders were on the inside of the little enclosure. Right. And there was a little delay for the seekers So the hiders started first, and then the seekers go, right? So at first, the AI would just like run into the walls or whatever, and then it continuously ran into the walls, didn't really do much until the hiders learned to move the barriers in a way where the seekers can't find them, right? So then what ended up happening was they would block the two barriers in the beginning, but then the hider or the seekers knew to take that ramp, and this is all computers doing this, to put against the wall, to go over the wall to find the hiders, right? So then the hiders learned that was happening, so they would go and steal the ramp, put it into the wall, and then hide from the seekers.
Yeah.
Well, then the seekers knew, well, there's no way to go ahead and do this. So they were running into the wall a certain way where it broke the barrier, and it actually broke the code of the game to get to the hiders.
Wow.
So it essentially
that's kind of scary as well, because the breaking of the code part that's the thing, right?
Exactly. So my point is if AI
that was the checkmate.
Well, what's crazy about this is the AI literally learned how to exploit the game to win.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's where I get concerned, because I'm like, we feel as though like humans have a level of control over like what AI systems are doing at the moment, but like all that needs to happen is that an AI learns to break some sort of very pivotal part of our infrastructure, and yeah, we got ourselves a problem.
Did you hear what happened on I think it was Twitter? Was it Twitter? They I forget which company. Was it Microsoft or
might have been, Facebook? Might have been. I might keep going. I think I know where you're going.
So there was this AI that was unleashed onto social media.
I think it was Facebook.
And this AI was learning all types of stuff on the internet, and it became an extremely racist AI.
Oh my God.
Like it was saying like the most like craziest things you would ever think, and they had to shut it down. But this was all learned through the patterns of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It was like literally a depiction of what the internet was at its time. Talking about like, right extremist media and anti-Jewish, very anti-Semitic language. It was bad.
Wow.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh,
this is something I wrote, actually.
Is that it?
This is something I wrote, and it got like basically like a spirit possessed me and like allowed me to write like really well, like, but only for one article.
That's funny that you wrote about it. Yes.
Well, this is a little bit different. This is something I discovered when I was researching something called GPT-3, which is general performance training. Like it's the thing that understands human language better than anything ever before. So you could give, and like Elon Musk started this company and like then he removed himself from it, but it's like open AI, and their goal is to like control the beast of like AI so that it's used for good instead of evil. And so they're like kind of on the cutting edge. And I had found on Twitter, like nobody cared or like nobody noticed, but there was like one of the people who was testing open AI and GPT-3, which like GPT-3 is so good. You could just say like, you could tell it like make an app on iPhone to like message people and like show videos and like have people log in, and then it would just write the code and it'd be ready to go. Like it's like so advanced that like it's like on the edge of like the Turing test. And so that's what people were looking at whenever this person was posting, like Mario Klingman was like posting on Twitter like samples that seemed like they were written by real people, and like only input like certain variables, like who's the author, and so like GPT-3 can just know everything that author ever wrote and like know what style to write in and start writing new things.
Quantum
like,
computing.
Yeah, well, like it's pre-trained, so like it basically like it's a language. It's like the most advanced language model that ever existed. So like it basically it can think in like human language, basically, and
so
like
it can
spit
literally
out something.
It can literally become you.
And like what it did is it like it basically like wrote an article about Twitter that got posted on Twitter, and like it trolled people in the sense that like it made it seem like it didn't know what the definition of Twitter was, but it was just playing with people because people don't know what the definition of Twitter is. And then like people commented and said like, oh, it's so stupid. But like, you don't know if like the way that AI wrote everything, you could see it in this article I wrote, like,
so it was deceiving.
It made it seem like was the AI doing it because it's ironic that like Twittering like means that you're like leading people on and goofing around. And like, then the people who are saying that like, oh, it's so stupid, like it didn't work, are they playing along with the AI, or is the AI playing with them? And then like somebody literally posted something that was like saying like, wow, this works really well, like you should try to like apply it to people's like social media accounts. And like
that's crazy.
So the tester like took that person's name and put it into the algorithm, and then the algorithm wrote a story about killing that person. And then they posted that.
Yeah,
and
I remember hearing about this and freaking out. It's like really concerning because like you can almost now start to like ascribe like, I mean, I know technically you can't, but it's like you can begin to ascribe like some kind of like goal-oriented behavior or intention to an AI, which like seems to be developing like a sense of humor and perhaps some intentions of its own. Like it's starting to get to that really like weird phase of it's mimicking like a human state to such a degree that now there's like this blurring between the AI and like the human consciousness. Like it's getting to that. And I didn't really ever think that. I always thought this was a bit sci-fi that this would happen, but it's like it's already happening.
Yeah. And like so like in the article I outline the idea that like it doesn't matter if this is real or not, but like if you have a tester who's like posting publicly making it seem like it's real, that's like irresponsible use of the technology. And like I actually kind of use it as like a reason for people to get into crypto, is because like, I mean, I don't really say like exactly why, but just like this general idea that like, we basically need to control our money before all these psychopaths and like AIs are controlling it. And so like basically using fear to like make people FOMO into crypto, because like fear is used to make people do everything. So like
it really makes you begin to think about like what really smart psychopathic rich people have in the way of technology, because like this is just the stuff we know about. We know that this AI is out there. We know that this is possible. We know that there are deep fakes that are like crazy. Like, have
exactly.
You guys those like Tom Cruise ones recently? Like they're just insane. So we know that this is just what we know exists. Like imagine what's like shielded from our knowledge by people with very powerful interests. Like imagine.
Hey everyone, I don't mean to interrupt. I do have to go.
Oh yeah.
No worries.
It's been such a pleasure,
Maddie. Thank you so much for having me on the panel. Amazing information. We absolutely need to do this again.
Hell yeah.
We are
Sure.
the amount of knowledge that's in this call right now and the amount of brain power is extraordinary. So really, it was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for you, your audience, the panel, Blaze. Absolute pleasure meeting you.
It was lovely.
I'm gonna listen to your music video. I seen a little snippet of what was going on in it. Seems super creative. So I'm excited to watch that.
Thank
And
you so much.
if you ever want to stream, Blaze, you can always hit me up. I'm sure my Twitter and whatnot's in the description. And even if you want to talk about whatever and shoot the shit, we can do that too. Because it's always great when minds like ours come together in collaboration to speak in terms of really things that need to be spoken about, you know? So
Great, 100% with all of that. Absolutely. Loved meeting you today and loved, just learning more about you and your views and all of the incredible cerebral power up there. So I'll definitely be in contact.
sounds great, guys. Hey, have a great rest of your panel. Much love, guys. God bless. Later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh man, he's so good.
Yeah, he's great. He's great.
So it's people can check it out at like aistakes.com or like go to my Medium.
Awesome.
Like
your article, you mean?
MaddieAllin.medium.com.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be interested to have a read for sure. But it definitely just gets you thinking about what's already out there and what potentially has already been deployed and is already being used. Like, especially I feel like these platforms like Twitter and really any social media network, provides so much opportunity for people to utilize stuff like this. And I just wonder. It makes me wonder.
Did you see that movie? What was it called? The one on Netflix. There was like a documentary about how bad social media is for us. And
I don't know if I might have.
It called this, not The Social Network. That was the Facebook one.
That was a movie.
It was like The Social Dilemma. That's what it was called.
I actually don't think I did, but I will.
It's kind of like scary. But it's like, again, it like gets you back to this like signal to noise thing that we're talking about, and like fear. So when I started writing, I mean, I quickly realized the psychology of like people's attention, especially when they're reading something like a headline. Like basically Medium, like a pretty good place to like publish, your work. They basically lay out like all these ideas for like, here's what you should do to like make really good content so like people will want to read it. Like one of the pieces of advice that I followed is like, you should spend as much time writing the title as you do the entire article, because people are never going to read the article if the title isn't perfect. And so like when I'm sitting there spending way too much time dealing with the title, like you go through so many different versions, and then you realize that like leading people on and like making people afraid and like sensationalizing stuff, like you realize, like I used to criticize, and I still do, like the general media for like not reporting stuff anymore, like honestly, but just sensationalizing everything. But it opens my eyes to like, well, this is kind of like how people are. And when you create an attention economy where like, it costs $1 per click on Twitter to advertise something, like that's how much money they're collecting off people. If you accidentally click on something, somebody's paying $1 for that. Like that's too. So like the social dilemma, it like kind of goes into that a little bit. But what are your thoughts on all that?
All that. I mean, to me, like the free model, I'm not really a fan of anymore. Like I think, Facebook probably became a thing when I was about, 1920 or something. Like it kind of really started to take hold here in Australia, and obviously the other networks closely followed. But this like free model, I think, again, is just so open to being exploited in so many different ways, whether it's through advertising. And I think also we can see the way it can be used to kind of shift public opinion in terms of politics as well. I think there's a lot of like kind of undue power in the hands of like these big kind of tech monopolies. So all that stuff definitely bothers me. And so I wonder as well whether maybe like paid models might make more sense, where people, subscribe to some sort of platform or community that's more in line with their own values, where, decisions about advertising and all that sort of stuff are made within communities. Something like that could be the answer. Like, because I just think the free model has so many hidden costs, and it might be worth starting to explore whether there's another way we can set up these social networks.
Did you hear about like airdrops? Do you know what
As
those
in
are?
like the Uniswap ones and 1inch and all that sort of stuff? Yeah, I think I missed out though.
I think that's the solution for
Okay.
centralized like technology companies, like, and I'm not sure if it holds up or not. Like, this is another one of my mad scientist ideas. So
Love it.
probably not all of them are like sound, but just this idea that like already we're seeing how many, like, what is it, over $10 billion now that Uni's worth, like, and all they did was create something that you can literally copy and paste, and like tons of people did, like even 1inch copied and pasted. Like, why would that have any value? Like, it still kind of blows my mind. And like, okay, so you made something and then like you got scared that people were going to copy and paste it, so now you just like you duct taped a coin onto it and then gave it away for free, then like probably got a bunch of centralized exchanges to like buy into it, so now they own it even though they pretend like they don't. And like, it just seems like there's something there, like a competitor of Facebook, which is just like, all right, everybody who's used this, like, you own it now. And like, that's like the value in a social network, right? Like, we're still, it's like we're learning with crypto before the cryptos like get corrupted, like Bitcoin. We're learning like Metcalfe's law, is it that like the value of the network is like proportional? It's like how many users?
Yeah, square of.
Is that the right one?
Yeah, that's Metcalfe's. Yeah.
And so like, so why don't you just airdrop something to everybody in the world, and now you have a bunch of value? Like, that's probably what Facebook is going to do in the next month. Like, they're going to launch their DM coin, and like, then they're going to have the most valuable network because they have 2.5 billion users. And like, that's not good.
That's not good. That's not good. It's just kind of like, yeah, when you stare down the barrel of that and you realize, like, yeah, in monetary terms, what that is worth. So like, I don't even know what the square of 2.8 billion is, but it sounds like a huge number. Like 2.8 billion squared. So that would be technically the value of that network.
But I think they're going to screw up. Like, my prediction is always like positive and optimistic, because like, I really think the more you try to take away freedom, the more just resilient you're making it. Like with Bitcoin, every time they tried to like break it, it got stronger until they just like centralized it, and now they call it decentralized, and like, that's a pretty good like trick. But then like HEX, literally HEX is it's a UTXO fork of Bitcoin is what it's called, like hybrid, along with like, what would you call it, like a token sale or whatever, that's like not a security. So there's just like, there's so many aspects to HEX that are like, wow, that's really smart. Like, it is kind of, it's like, the next version of Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely optimistic as well. I think like in time, like structures like, you know, Facebook and the monopolies that we're seeing at the moment, they'll decay like eventually, and people, it just won't be cool to be part of that network anymore, and people won't want to be involved, and eventually people will move, and you know, they'll probably have their finger in lots of the pies that people move to, but like hopefully over time it gets better, it gets more spread out.
They're gonna mess up because they're gonna like move so fast, and like, you know, because that's the ethos, right? It's like move fast and break things, and like we already see it. Like they bought off a bunch of politicians because like America told them they couldn't do it when it was called Libra before, and so then their Libra Association, like I don't know if you saw my stream, like the Senate Finance Committee sent like a letter to all the CEOs that were a part of the Libra Association and basically said like, we're going to come after you for child pornography and money laundering, like if you don't drop it right now. And then only the financial institutions like credit card companies and like everybody who's connected to like fighting terrorism by like being a banker and like controlling the world monetary system, like those companies like dropped off. But like there were certain tech companies that stayed on, and you could see like the one time like behind the curtain to see like who's on whose side, and then like it still gets shut down, and then all of a sudden it's like back up, like, oh, we renamed it DM, and like now the government's cool with it. Like that's suspicious.
Yeah.
But they're gonna so they finally paid off enough politicians, right? And so like, but they're still moving too fast and breaking things, and like, so they're gonna unleash like fake crypto on the world, thinking that now they copied it and they have a better system because they're centralized and like everything's gonna be okay. But like, surprise, surprise, you know, like maybe all you're doing is onboarding everybody into HEX and you don't realize it.
I do like the idea of the backfire, and I certainly hope that's what occurs. Like, I think you're probably going to get like a percentage of the population who will like fall for it, so to speak, which is, you know, sad to know. But hopefully, you know, they'll kind of learn from that event, or learn from, you know, the experience of interacting with Facebook's currency, and hopefully it will lead them to, you know, want to search for something better. But also I think the censorship stuff is going to be the big backfire for them as well, because if they're going to be turning off accounts, that means they're potentially going to be turning off bank accounts now rather than just social media profiles when they've got their currency involved in the pot. So, you know, when people like lose access to their money or lose access to the payment system that, you know, is going to be part of Facebook, they'll quickly start seeking out something that is better, where they're protected, where they can, you know, trust the system to, you know, preserve their wealth. So, you know, I think they're probably already far too big for their boots, and they're already annoying a lot of their users just with those censorship antics. And I think that'll only get amplified when, you know, real money is kind of thrown into the equation as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like your thoughts there, because it's because I think it's gonna go better than expected at first, and then it's like, you know, like you said, like the word backfire is really good, because there are like unexpected consequences to like putting more restraints on, like that's like restraining freedom even more, right? When you like have a central bank digital currency, like, and a Facebook coin, and like you're pretending like they're different, and like Bitcoin, and you're pretending that that's different, and like, but people are gonna know eventually what's what, I think, and like, you know, then eventually you're gonna opt out like one way or another, I think, like to freedom, because what have people been doing since people started is like trying to organize like just enough to have the benefits of society, but also trying to like rebel enough to like have the benefits of freedom, right? Like, that's That's
Yeah.
the negotiation. That's the dance we're doing, right?
Yes, it's a dance. I think that's the right word as well. It's always kind of in motion. And like I think like I love the Matrix movies. I'm like such a like a Matrix nerd, but it is such a good analogy that they've come up with, that there's always going to be this like percentage of people who choose freedom, you know, and there's always going to be a percentage as well who choose the slavery or choose to stay within the system. And so we've just got to, you know, constantly be fortifying our resistance and, you know, holding firm in it and attracting those who want to be a part of it, and letting that grow organically, you know. But yeah,
that makes me want to rewatch The Matrix.
Yeah, I think
it's been a while. Like I mean I know it well, but like
yeah, it's a perfect analogy. I think like I do think they like really stumbled onto like a really deep truth, because like there's an element of choice going on at all moments, and sometimes, you know, for some people they just aren't aware of the other option yet, but for some people, even when presented with the other option, they don't choose it. And so the system itself will probably always have people involved and people willing to be part of it to one extent or another, but on the other side there'll always be, you know, that resistance. So
I might need your help with something. So have you heard of HEX Cameo?
I have not. No.
Okay. It's like it's a subsection of my YouTube page. It's where like I took like some of my Uniswap money, and this is like before I showed my face in HEX, and I was like, I want to give back to the community. Like Richard just gave me so much free money. Like I want to do something cool. And I had been like writing Medium articles that nobody cared about. So like I did this thing where like there's an app and like a website you can use to like hire celebrities to do a shout out to somebody. So like I spent like several $100s like getting famous people to like shout out to Richard or like shout out to HEX, whether they knew it or not. Then I like put a frame around it that made it like seem like they were definitely talking about HEX. Yeah. And so I got a Lindsay Lohan, Miss America, the 45th president of Mexico, Kevin from The Office, the lady from Lion King, Joe Exotic.
That's so
like that's Carol Baskin. I got her. I got like the guy from Hodor from Game of Thrones, like Hold the Door, and like Christian Nairn, and then what was the last one? Like oh yeah, Flavor Flav.
Flavor Flav.
Because like the clock thing, you know, like
that's so cool.
It's a time lock, so he's got the clocks. And so like kind of hard to follow like that, of course. And like then I started like showing my face in live streaming because, you know, obviously. And so but like, you know, I've still got my sights like, oh, you know, is there anybody who would come along who'd be like a really good cameo? And of course, so like I got my little spreadsheet, you know, like a little mad data scientist like I am. And but there's one that like I think we could do something with, but I'm just not sure.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think his name is like Agent Smith or something. Agent Smith.
Yeah. Oh gosh, what's his real name?
But like he's on there as Agent Smith, and like he could be hired like for not that much money.
Really?
And so like, but I'm so like I forget the Matrix. Like you know, it's been like 10 or 15 years since I've seen it. So like, I'm just trying to remember. And I was like such a big fan when it came out, but like, I'm just trying to remember like how exactly that would hook into HEX, like his character.
Agent Smith. So Agent Smith basically represents the system. So he is kind of like a program within the Matrix that is there to basically keep people in it. So he's there to like hunt out, you know, the Neos of the Matrix and get them to kind of, let's say, change their thinking and kind of, subconsciously accept the program again. So he's like the equal and opposite reaction to Neo, I guess you could say, within the Matrix. Because then, like, at the very, very end, like, I won't. It's almost like giving you a spoiler, but because you can't remember the movie. But the very end.
Yeah. Don't tell me. But like,
yeah.
So here's what I'm thinking. Maybe I can rewatch The Matrix, and then maybe I could message you like, the 2 or 3 sentences that I'm thinking. You could tell me whether it like fits or not, whether it like makes sense. Because I don't want to I don't want to go through this all and then be like, oh, you actually like didn't understand this part or something like.
I got you back. Don't even worry. Yeah, I think I rewatched the whole trilogy like not that long ago. So yeah, I'll be keen to hear your idea.
So would it make sense for him to be like, buy Bitcoin, don't buy HEX? Like, is that something he would say?
Oh yeah, I get what you're saying. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah. We got it, like, and it's got to be like easy for people to understand, maybe, or maybe hard. I don't know.
There will be something perfect because like there's a few of those like lines that he's really known for, like the Mr. Anderson kind of.
Oh yeah.
Like line, yeah. I'll let you know. I'll let you know if anything pops into the old noggin.
Right on. Well, I've really enjoyed streaming with you today.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. It was like great to just like connect and chat to some other nerdy psychs and hear what you guys are thinking, which is always fun, and just like have a really good chat. So thank you again for having me on.
Yeah, and I hope if like I hope you create your own channel, and until you do, you're always welcome on here. So
awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to do it again. Yeah, I'd love to do another Slack chat.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to play this 30-second outro. Thanks everybody for watching. It's been a blast.
See ya.